This episode of the Cult Popture podcast was brought to you by our Patreon. If you want to tell us which films we should watch, get up to 2 extra exclusive podcasts a month, give us something to talk about in the post-credit scene at the end of each episode, or join us for our monthly movie club Zoom call where we discuss a film together, then please consider joining the cult and donating at www.patreon.com/cultpopture.
You're trying to do the drums. I can't make a drum sound. I don't know what I'm doing. Hello everybody.
Well, thanks for listening.
Thank you for listening to the first 20
let's
seconds.
thank people up top. Thank you in advance for listening.
Wow. Sounds like a movie title. Like, thank you for smoking. Like, where it's like a play
And
on a
Be
popular
Kind,
phrase.
Rewind.
Yeah. Thank you in advance for listening. Well, that unfortunately...
Thank you in advance is a good title.
Yep, I agree. However...
It feels like you're about to say, are you going to do this the whole episode?
I'm not.
Like, this is one of these, like, these classic, you had something planned and then I interjected with my own funny, unplanned banter.
I had nothing
And you're
planned.
looking at me like... Are you done?
No, not at all. I had nothing planned for the intro.
Okay.
So this works fine, to be honest.
This actually works better.
I prefer this. Welcome, everyone, to the Cult Popture podcast, specifically film franchise Fortnights on the Cult Popture podcast. My name is AJ, and over there, talking about stuff, is Richard Martin. Hello, Richard.
Hello.
Hello. And this is our little show, our little hobby that we do together that we've been doing for a long time. And what it is every fortnight we watch a franchise, a movie franchise, or a film franchise, if you are into your alliteration. And then we get together and we discuss that film franchise. So if you've never heard the show before, you can go back and listen to other film franchises we've discussed.
And watch along as well if you want.
Yep, such as Sisterhood of the Traveling Pants and Godzilla. Now, you can join in these conversations on our Discord. If you want to join our Discord server, there's a link to that in the show notes below. Join it now.
Follow us on Twitter.
Hey, I'm currently listening to the Jumanji episode, and people will spoil it for you. Won't that be fun?
Richard dies at the end.
So yeah, today on Film Franchise Fortnights, we're going to be discussing the Jumanji Series, an unconventional franchise of arguably 4 films.
This isn't your mama's franchise.
These four films include Jumanji from 1995, Zathura, A Space Adventure from 2005, Jumanji Welcome to the Jungle from 2017, and Jumanji The Next Level from 2019. Just going to undo my overalls because they're clinking about.
I undid my pants.
That same reason. So this series, the Jumanji series, broadly, in broad terms, it follows a group of people who are sucked into, spat out of, or otherwise enveloped by various magical jungle/space themed games. Trying to say a sentence that applies to all 4 movies.
Yeah.
It's not always a jungle, and it's not always a board game. Puts their lives at stake. Yeah, exactly. And they've got to complete the game to reach safety. The first 2 entries in the series, Jumanji and Zathura, while not connected story-wise, were connected thematically and commercially, with promotional material for Zathura emphasizing it as from the world of Jumanji. It's also worth noting that both Jumanji and Zathura are based off picture books by children's author Chris Van Allsburg, making Zathura one of the rare and controversial examples of a spiritual sequel on this podcast. Boy, do these start conversations on our Discord, which you can join today via a link in the show notes.
Yeah, the interesting thing with this one is that, like, okay, Jumanji is undoubtedly a franchise. We're just giving you more content. Like, if it was like, no, we're not counting Zathura. Like, in that sense, I could see it being more controversial because it's like, we're withholding our opinions on Zathura from you. Whereas it's like now we're giving them them to you at no added cost. So you fucking, get over it. It is a franchise. If you go on the Jumanji franchise Wikipedia page, it lists as thorough.
That's true. But also another thing of note is usually people out in our Discord and on various other platforms complain about certain films that we've considered as part of one franchise. Sometimes I can understand where they're coming from. Sometimes I can't. Never have I agreed with them, even if I've understood where they're coming from. But in this case, people were like, you have to do Zathura if you're doing Jumanji. So be consistent is all I'm saying.
And it was one of those actually, if you're doing Jumanji, you'll also have to do Zathura. It's like you have already been planning to do that.
But that's also not. We'll get to this when we get to Zathura. That's actually not. It's actually not as clear cut as people are saying it is. But we'll get to that when we get to Zathura. First thing we're going to talk about is Jumanji 1995. This was directed by Joe Johnston, and this is our third Joe Johnston film for film franchise Fortnights. Do you know what the other two are?
Captain America: The First Avenger and Jurassic Park 3.
Correct. Do you know what Jumanji 1995 has on Rotten Tomatoes?
I believe it's not fresh. Is that correct?
That's correct.
But it's not by... Oh, no, it's is it in its 30s?
No.
50s?
Yes.
56.
55. Pew, pew, pew! Can you tell me what Jumanji 1995 is about?
Yeah, one...
Disappears for 10 minutes. Okay.
Disappears for 26 years.
Oh, very good.
Oh. Captain Wacky.
I didn't know Captain Wacky was invited to the podcast.
Well, you best start believing in Captain Wacky's podcasts. You're on one. Okay, so
you'd best start believing in jungles, Alan Parrish. You're in one till the dice reads 5 or 8.
Well, yeah, spoilers for my synopsis of Jumanji, but so it's 1969. There's these this little kid, Alan Parrish, finds this board game Jumanji, and this ain't your mama's board game.
No.
It sucks him into the board game. They start to experience kind of weird shit. Plays the drums when it's near, but he gets this thing comes up on the game that says, "In the jungle you must wait until the dice reads 5 or 8," and then he gets, and quite horrifying for the time, special effects, gets warped into the game, and then the person he's playing with runs out because bats come down the chimney, and
her name is Sarah Whittle, or as Robin Williams pronounces it, Sarah Whittle. Very, very sharp T when he pronounces it.
Yeah, so cut to 26 years later because she doesn't continue the game.
She clearly didn't understand the riddle.
Yeah. So now it's 26 years later. This the Parish house is this it's like the Amityville house kind of thing. It's one of these classic horror, the kids will tell stories about it, because this kid Alan Parrish disappeared 26 years ago, and everyone's the dad went mad and chopped him up and hit him in the walls, sort of thing. But then our two main characters, Judy and Carl, Carl's
the shoe guy, the cop. Peter.
Peter, yeah. Why does it have the...
Judy and Peter Shepherd.
Okay.
Okay.
Pause for a
All
moment.
right.
The cast for this film on Wikipedia is Robin Williams as Aaron, as Alan, Kirsten as Judy, David as, blah, 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 as Carl, as Sarah Whittle, as Van Pelt, as Nora Shepherd. And then says Jumanji features a 1995 era cast that includes Bradley Pierce as Judy's younger brother, Peter Shepherd. He's the fucking main character. One of the top 3. Why is he not in the cast? And he's like, yeah, it's a 1995 era cast.
Because he's the only one that didn't stay famous. Kirsten Dunst went on to
Still,
become
you fucking
famous.
Put it in the thing.
I know, it's weird. I saw that as well when I was researching.
Yeah, because I just went, so Alan, Judy, the next one must be the name of the kid. But yeah. Anyway, so they find the board game, they play for a little bit, weird shit happens, but then the dice rolls an 8. and or a 5. And then this
Doesn't matter.
fully grown Robin Williams comes out of the game, and then they realize that to stop all the horrific goings on, which is like stuff coming out of the jungle, which we haven't been welcome to yet.
Stuff.
Yeah, so animals, whatnot. Come out and they realize they have to finish the board game, but obviously this gets harder and harder with the amount of shit that gets put in. But then when the game is finished, finally, Alan and Sarah, the girl Sarah Whittle, who they have to recruit
Say it
to
properly.
finish the game. Recruit.
No, I mean Sarah Whittle.
They have to return. They have to finish the board game, and when they do, they're like the timeline for Alan and Sarah is reset to 1969. And so there's like the kids who are main characters are no longer orphaned, and it's like all the stuff. But everyone has memories of what happened.
Well, I don't think the kids do. I don't think they remember what happened.
Yeah, probably. Yeah.
It's like that timeline stops. I actually think Kirsten Dunst's character dies in the original timeline. Right at the end, she gets shot with one of the plants, like darts, and they call Jumanji and finish the game before she dies. So I think it's implied that like they're essentially saving her life by going back in time and resetting the timeline, where they also save Peter and Judy's parents as well, who died in a ski accident in Canada. What did you think of Jumanji 1995?
Well, so this is one of a handful of films that, like, long before this podcast, I used as examples of like films that somehow just skirted by me on during childhood. The Mummy and Jumanji. It's like these ones that are like so instrumental to people's upbringings, and I just never happened to see them. I will talk about it later, but I was quite a big fan of the TV series. I just never saw the movie. Right. I think it's one of these things, and I think I'm now realizing that this is the thing with the Mummy as well, is that like if there was any kind of remote chance that it was scary, I probably would have avoided it as a kid. And like so many people told me both of those movies were actually really scary. To this day, people tell me Jumanji is scary.
It's scary if you're a kid.
Exactly. But like, and people, were traumatized by it as a kid. I did watch Jumanji, this 1995 one. I'd watched it, I think 2 years ago. I watched it in anticipation of, actually maybe after I'd watched The Next Level, because I'd seen,
I think it was.
I'd seen Zathura, Welcome to the Jungle, and The Next Level. And then I was like, oh fuck, I'm gonna go watch Jumanji because I saw it was on Amazon Prime or something. But yeah, it is interesting because it's one of it's similar to The Mummy, although The Mummy's had this big critical reevaluation. But it's one of these movies that like people are like, one of the best movies ever made. And then you look at the reviews, they're like, it's actually not like got that great scores. The reviews, even contemporary reviews, aren't that great. And especially knowing the heights, that spoilers for the rest of the podcast, knowing the heights that the franchise would later reach, it does like make Jumanji just this thing I have to do to get to, the good stuff. Sure. And so it might be my least favorite of the franchise.
Interesting. You say that like, I mean, yeah, that's the general consensus.
That's the critical consensus. But I mean, like, I mean, like I say, I think like it's one of those things that seems sacrilegious. Like people are like, oh, I love the new ones, but you can't top Robin Williams,
Yeah.
And it's like, and Rob, don't get me wrong, Robin Williams is great and makes a 2-star movie a 3.5-star movie,
Sure.
But it's still not quite that amazing. It's some of the effects have aged quite well. Some of the effects have aged incredibly poorly.
Yeah. Absolutely.
So was this an instrumental film for you growing up?
Oh man, I watched this so many times as a kid. I
more than The Mummy.
Thought about it. No, it wouldn't have been more than The Mummy, but it was like pre-Mummy days. Like there are quite a lot of parallels between this and The Mummy 1999 for me. I probably haven't seen this movie since the last century. I was thinking about this. I don't think I would have watched this after the age of 7 or 8.
Interesting.
Or 5 or 8.
I thought you would have rewatched it though with the new ones.
No, not at all. But it feels very much written into my DNA in the sense that like certain lines of dialogue sound like evokes, but also not just the lines, but like the cadence and delivery of certain lines of dialogue almost send me into like this lullaby-esque state of relaxation, because I'm like, I remember being 5 years old and watching this movie and hearing Robin Williams be like, "You played a game with a little boy, a game with drums." And I'm like, oh, I remember him saying that. I remember this line. And like, there's so many examples of that. Probably more visceral than The Mummy because I saw it less than The Mummy. They're more buried in my memory. And so it's more of like a delightful, like, oh, I remember this when I hear it again.
Like in The Pacifier.
Yeah. Check out our Patreon to find our episode of The Pacifier. Another reference to an old episode is I talked about on the Santa Claus, when we covered the Santa Claus, about how like the little boy saying, "You killed him," referring to Santa, like was like this real nostalgic soundbite for me. Almost the same soundbite as in this movie when they visit Sarah Whittle and she faints when she realizes it's Alan, and Peter goes, "You killed her," and I'm like, did I is it not the one from the Santa Claus that I remember? Is it actually from this? I don't know for sure. But yeah, over the years, especially since I didn't have the same sort of, I didn't go back to this in the same way that I often went back to The Mummy. All I heard about this was that that Jumanji 1995 actually isn't that good, and it's more of a nostalgia thing than anything else. And so I kind of subconsciously adopted that opinion as well. Right, and when I would talk about it, it'd be like, the new Jumanji's really good. And it's not like the old one was that amazing, even though I had no actual right to express that opinion because I didn't know.
Well, that is your right to express that opinion.
Right. Well, thank you. But rewatching it for this, I thought this was awesome. I thought that it's a great family adventure 90s blockbuster. It has, I thought, a really tight script, and I really liked all the characters. I thought the story structure was great. It's sort of like built into the progression of the board game in a way that feels like it would have been really easy to write because you just, what do we do next? Roll the dice.
Stakes,
yeah, exactly. Which kind of comforts me. If I was ever stuck writing something like this, it must have been such a relief to be like, just roll the dice. That's all the next thing that has to happen. And B, it gives the story like a solid backbone as the audience can sense where it's heading at all times, and the stakes are very easily understood. I think there's some A+ set pieces and sequences. I think the Stampede stuff is like great. I love how it breaks out into the little New Hampshire town that they're in, and like it becomes like a unifying thing. It's not just about these four characters, it's about a whole town in that sense. I mean, I wouldn't say I was like completely in love with it, but I don't have anything bad to say about it, and I certainly don't understand what everyone's issues are, what all the critics' issues are. Like, I think maybe movies on average were maybe better in the 90s. Like, there were more hits.
Born in the wrong era.
No, not in that sense, but maybe there were more strikes than strikeouts. Maybe just because of the amount of movies that got made. And so the, like, what is expected is I reckon if this movie came out today, it would get into the 70s on Rotten Tomatoes.
Well, no, it's just that thing of, like, as well that, we also remember the stinkers that came out last year because they came out last year.
Yeah.
Like, I think the same amount of movies roughly are coming out, but it's just a certain amount of standing the test of time. But like you get outliers like Twister, which was like the biggest fucking movie of the year, but no one remembers it, you know.
Right. Yeah. Well, someone who really didn't like this film was Roger
Ebert.
He gave it 1.5 out of 4 stars. He criticised its reliance on special effects to convey its story. Can't imagine what he would think of almost every blockbuster these days. He thought the story was lacking. He questioned the decision to rate the film PG rather than PG-13 because he thought it was too scary, which is a pretty fuddy-duddy reason to rate something 1.5 stars, in my opinion. He thought that there's a part where Peter tries to cheat, and as punishment, he gets turned into a sort of a monkey-human hybrid, and Roger Ebert thought that was too scary for kids.
Not for me.
Ebert concluded that it's like one of those video games where you achieve one level after another by killing it and not getting killed. The ultimate level for young viewers will be being able to sit all the way through the movie. Like, whatever, dude. I sat all the way through this movie when I was like 5 to 8 years old. So I keep making a 5 to 8 joke. I don't know if that's landing each time, but there it is.
Yeah.
Yeah. So do you have any like specific issues with this film? What did you give it on Letterboxd?
3.5 stars.
I just think this is such a serviceable.
Yeah.
Like,
what did you
I think
give
it's
on
really good.
Letterboxd? I
gave it 4 stars, and I wasn't expecting to do that. I thought I was going to give it 3 to 3.5, and then I was like, I've got to be honest with myself. I had a really good time with this film, and I think it's really well paced. I think it might be the best paced of all 4 movies if we're just talking pacing. And I think that
I don't know if I agree with that.
It's just exciting. It's just constantly exciting, and I believe in the characters, and I want them to succeed. Yeah, I don't know. I struggle to understand what everyone's problem was.
Yeah, maybe the thing you were praising about the just you roll the dice. It's like that kind of I don't know. Maybe I think I might see that as more of an impediment to the film. That it's like that it is just very like, okay, well now do this part. Oh no, there's a thing. Cool. Now do the next thing. And like you could do like in something like Welcome to the Jungle, it's like it's a video game and it's just levels, but there's like 3 of them, so it kind of fits the 3 act structure rather than just being like, here's a little sequence, here's a sequence.
Well, you could also argue though that in the same way, like a lot of video game, for example, adaptations struggle to like adapt the medium, that if this is a board game adaptation, which is not based on a real board game, but if it were, like, well, at least the board game came out after, like it is also adapting how you play a board game, not just what the story of the board
but it's
game
a movie
might be. I'm just saying it's interesting. I'm glad that there's at least there's one movie about a magical board game.
No, that's the thing. At least there's
playing the game.
I would feel bad if we came here to talk about Jumanji and there wasn't at least one film about a board game.
According to the author of the original storybook, Chris Van Allsburg, Jumanji is a Zulu word which means many effects, as in like the many things that happen when you roll the dice. But when I entered Jumanji on Google Translate from Zulu to English, it translated it as Tuesday. Whether to trust Google Translate or not, though, I don't know, because last year I entered my name in Latin. I entered Alex, that's my real name. Latin to English, it told me Alex is Latin for pickle.
Nice.
Which I feel like I would have found that out by last year.
I'm Pickle AJ.
Well, I literally said that because, like, what are the odds? How did I get to 26 and not know that Alex is Latin for pickle? Feels like that's not real.
Yeah. If you go on the Jumanji picture book Wikipedia page, it says Jumanji star Robin Williams said Jumanji is a Zulu word for a word meaning many effects, though this is unverified. Which, one, is interesting that it says Robin Williams said it, and 2, I feel like that's incredibly easy to verify.
That's what I'm saying.
Ask someone who speaks Zulu.
Yeah. If anyone's interested, many effects translates from English to Zulu as Imu Fumila
Zathura.
Iminingi. There you go. So maybe that should have been the title. Speaking of dubious sources, though, Richard, according to Screen Rant, Bruce Willis, Tom Hanks, Dan Aykroyd, Chevy Chase, Kevin Costner, Sean Connery, Harrison Ford, Michael Keaton, Bill Paxton, Bryan Cranston, and Arnold Schwarzenegger were all originally considered for the role of Alan Parrish.
Okay.
The only one that I saw coming up more than once was Tom Hanks, but even that I couldn't really verify by any means.
Wikipedia says he was the first choice, allegedly.
Yeah. So, first of all, Sean Connery would have been so old.
Fucking garbage as well.
but like, he would have been so old by this point in 1995. It'd already be like in his late 50s. But also, like, a pre-Malcolm in the Middle, Bryan Cranston was considered for That doesn't seem right at all.
Not.
Yeah. But also on Wikipedia, accompanied by a citation needed note, it says that Kirstie Alley was considered for the role of Sarah Whittle. But I think that's just there because, like myself, someone else definitely falsely remembered Kirstie Alley as playing Sarah in this movie instead of Bonnie Hunt. She's just got a Kirstie Alley-like quality to her. Not that she's a Republican. I don't know what I'm sensing there, but I always remembered it as Kirstie Alley for some reason.
Wow.
So although Carl Bentley is when in 1969 he works for the shoe company, and then in 1995 he's a cop.
Ooh.
He is shown to have still been an adult when Alan Parrish was a child, but David Alan Grier, who plays Carl, is actually only 4 years younger than Robin Williams, who is also 10 years older than Bonnie Hunt, even though they're supposed to be exactly the same age, which is, you
and
messaged
he's
me and was
significantly older than Kirsten Dunst.
Well, I think that's fine, but because you messaged me and was like, how old are you willing to believe Robin Williams is supposed to be? What do you think?
Like he looks in his 40s. I believe he's supposed to be 38, but withered by the jungle, you know.
I could believe he's 38 though. If you think about him after he shaves his beard and stuff, like he could be 30. Like
the thing is, while he has the beard, I could believe he's 38 and just has a big beard. When he shaves, I'm like, this is a grown man.
But 38 is a grown man. I don't know. I didn't have too much trouble believing he'd be that old. I do have trouble believing that Carl is 20-ish years older than Robin Williams, though, because he does not look 58. There's a really interesting sort of, I don't know if it's a phenomenon, but I've heard about it before, where like there's a real specific to the time reference in this movie that lost its context as time went on. Ooh. And people kind of thought it meant something else, which is when Van Pelt, who's a big game hunter who gets released from the game, he tries to buy a gun from the gun shop, and the gun shop owner asks him, he's like, "You're not a postal worker, are you?" Which I think so many audiences would have been like, because he kind of looks like he's wearing a postman's uniform. But what it's actually supposed to be referencing was like a string postal. But like a string of postal workers shooting people up in the mid-90s, like something that we just don't really associate with postal workers anymore. But it's a really interesting example of that sort of thing happening. I watched a video recently which sort of explained away the in The Simpsons when it went to the future in like the 90s and they referenced President Trump. And everyone's like, oh my God, they referenced the future. And like, it's a video by JJ McCulloch. I would really recommend watching it. And it went back and sort of examined what life was like at the time and why that joke was not that much of a stretch to make. Like, it made perfect sense in the time.
Well, it's because he announced he was running for president a bunch of times and they were joking, imagine if he actually got it.
Yeah, exactly.
The other thing that's like something that I like, one of those like fun little facts about the film, that was one of those things that I knew long before I watched the film, because I had seen before my eyes so many people's minds be blown by this fact, but that Van Pelt the hunter is played by the same actor who played Alan Parrish's father. And it's like one of these things that's like, okay. But like seeing people that like, here's your childhood ruined. That's the same actor. And then people be like, what? Tagging their friend, my mind is blown. And they go, what? But, I was like, okay, they look like the same actor.
Jonathan Hyde, yeah. No, it's like, it's supported by the text as well. Like, it's not, it shouldn't destroy your childhood. It's like a
I don't think that was exactly what they...
But like, because like the riddle that unleashes Van Pelt, I can't remember it off by heart.
Here's a hunter played by your dad.
It says, here's a hunter played by your dad.
Or you'll be sad.
Yeah, exactly. And I mean, essentially, it says like someone from your past, etc. Like it's not hidden. It's not hidden in the text.
Yeah, he's hidden under a bunch of makeup.
That's true. Did you have any favourite moments in Jumanji that you wanted to sing out to?
Well, I had one when I watched it the first time, and I was so excited to see it this time, and it's not in there. When at the end of the film, because it's like the whole thing is like when you reach Jumanji, you have to say Jumanji, and to
finish the game.
Yeah, the Van Pelt is got Robin Williams at gunpoint. And he says, "Any last words?" And I was like, "Jumanji!" And then he's like, "Jumanji, bitch!" But that's not actually what happens. It's very just like Jumanji.
It's very Robin Williams, though.
It is.
It's very Robin Williams.
The first time I saw it, I remembered it being this like fuck yeah moment, and this time I was like, "Oh, yeah, that's nice." Yeah, but I remembered it being a stand up and cheer moment. You know.
It feels like there were probably 6 or 7 takes of different ways to say Jumanji, and they went with the warm, sort of crackly Robin Williams delivery instead of anything big or verbose. Yeah, no, I remember. Yeah, that's interesting. I think maybe you confused it with the much more interesting deliveries in the other movies.
No, I did. I actually, I've this week have been looking through our messages to see when we've talked about Jumanji, because
a very normal thing to do between friends.
I do this all the time. Because I remember, I think it happened in person though, but I remember you telling me that you never actually see the jungle in the original Jumanji, and I was like, my mind was fucking blown. I had no idea. This was like after we started the podcast, so in the last 5 years, and I was trying to find when you told me that, but I think it must have been in person. But yeah, and so that was like this huge thing, because I was only familiar with Welcome to the Jungle, and I think it was just before Welcome to the Jungle came out, and I was familiar with the TV show which features the jungle.
Yeah.
So what I found when I was looking through the messages was me saying to you like, Van Pelt, any last words? Me stands up, Jumanji. And so I think that's how I remembered it. I remembered the version of me retelling it to you is what I remembered, not the actual what happens in the film.
That's really funny. Nice. Well, Richard, I know we're both eager to move through the first 2 movies as quick as possible. So I've got some dumb IMDb trivia to end our first discussion on Jumanji. For those who haven't listened to the show before, IMDb Trivia is user-submitted, which means a lot of it is really poorly written or otherwise dumb in other ways. So here are some examples of some dumb IMDb Trivia. It is not known who played the gun shop owner's assistant Louise in the movie, and the actress is not credited in the end credits, and to this day the actress's identity remains a mystery. That's right, the woman that has like one line in the background of a shot. Nobody knows who it is, and it remains a mystery. Like, who cares?
Do you reckon we could solve it?
I reckon it wouldn't be that hard. I reckon.
How would you do it? How would you go about it?
I would look. See if I could
exhume the body of Robin Williams.
No, I would look and see if I could find any production notes on Jumanji or casting calls or like schedules, call sheets and stuff like that. See if you can find it.
But you don't just stumble across those things every day.
No, but at the same time, like, it's such a random mystery thing to deem a mystery.
Yeah.
Like, I'm sure this information is still out there. It's just the one person that wrote this IMDb trivia entry doesn't know. Maybe it was Louise herself who wrote it, trying to make it so that there's mystery surrounding it, so then she comes back in a big way, and it's like,
on our podcast.
That's right. I played the assistant in the gun shop in Jumanji. Each player's path will cross each of their adjacent neighbour's path exactly twice. The player to their right first, and then the player on their left. It did not come up during the movie, but it is unknown how the game would react if a player's piece happens to obstruct the path of another player's piece. The one moving might continue unobstructed. The non-moving piece might be sent back to their start. The moving piece may merely have to stop until the obstructing piece moves. For what it's worth, it does not appear that 2 pieces could occupy the same square.
Right.
People have studied this movie, man. People
yeah, that's
have
really interesting. Like, why would the player have to Like, why would the player being intersected have to go back to the start? That's such a bizarre suggestion.
Yeah, weird. Only the players whose the game choose can hear the drums to find it. First of all, it's just something that happens in the movie, but also the way it's worded. Only the players, comma, whose the game choose, comma, can hear the drums, comma, to find it.
Who's the game choose?
Why are you talking like that? Finally, though the movie's plot differs greatly from that of the book on which it is based, the ending of the film is very similar, in which the game is found by two young children. In the book, the two children who find the game at the end are named Walter and Danny, the main characters from Zathura: A Space Adventure. However, the Zathura movie is a standalone film divorced from the Jumanji cinematic universe. All right, we've got our first call of someone saying it's not part of the franchise.
Here we go.
Is there anything else you want to talk about with Jumanji before we move on to Zathura?
Yeah, I think I'm going to trust the word of beloved Golden Globe nominated actor Jack Black over some dumb IMDb trivia writer.
Well, let's see if
he is a Golden Globe nominee.
Let's see if you can trust the word of one Jon Favreau, who directed Zathura: A Space Adventure in 2005.
God, he was nominated for School of Rock and Bernie.
Sweet. Yeah. This is our fourth Jon Favreau film. Can you name the other three? For film franchise.
Jungle Book, Iron Man 2.
Correct. Do you know what this has on Rotten Tomatoes?
Like 78.
It's got 76. What is this movie about?
This is Zathura, but in space. It's Jumanji, but in space.
Yeah.
But this time, so two young brothers, and we'll get to them, are drawn into an intergalactic adventure because their house, they play this board game called Zathura, and very similar to Jumanji. It's each turn you advance closer to the end, but you also some kind of obstacle comes, and
space-themed obstacles specifically.
Yeah, space-themed.
Such as going to space.
Yeah, so the first thing is that, like, when they start the game, their house teleports to space, essentially. And then so they have to work together to finish the game. And they're aided by an astronaut played by Dax Shepard.
And also their older sister, Lisa.
Played by Kristen Stewart.
Yep, there you go. It's Jumanji in space. It's very much just Jumanji in space, and that's not a bad thing. But what did you think of this film?
I really like so much of this film, and I saw this years ago, like maybe in like 2006 or 7. I saw this film on TV, and watched it recently again when I did my next level. I'm going to watch all the Jumanjis. And I remember really liking it. I remember being like, that's actually a pretty competent, pretty nice film. But my God, the two children, Walter and Danny, are infuriating. That
played by Josh Hutcherson and Bobo,
and the kid from Jonah Bobo from Crazy Stupid Love.
Jonah Bobo. Yeah. So that's your take?
Yeah.
But the kids are annoying?
Yeah, did you want more?
No, just clarifying before I jump in with the steal.
It's an assist.
Yeah, right. Because I can understand a lot of people, it's like very much like the Reddit hot take to be like, Zathura is actually better than Jumanji, when it's like, that's what all the critics think as well. And I can understand people saying this is better. I think Jon Favreau is easily a better director than Joe Johnston. But
Iron Man's better than Captain America.
Yeah. I don't think the story is as good, and I think the characters are really annoying. I hadn't seen this before. I'd never seen this before watching it for this podcast. And you had told me that like Jojo Bobo, whatever his name is.
Jonah Bobo.
He's like you're like, he's so bad in it. I didn't think the acting was bad. It's just like, yep, that's how kids are like at that age.
Well, that's the thing. It's like, they just scream at each other and they're just whiny and annoying.
Yeah.
And it just becomes frustrating. But like the entire movie is just Jonah Bobo. So Danny does something babyish. And then Walter says, "Don't be a baby," and he goes, "I'm not a baby," and it's like that's the most babyish reaction you could possibly come up with.
This is one of those things because you had an older sister and I had an older brother, like I'm relating to it in a way that you're not. Like,
they have an older sister too.
That's true, but I remember like having like living in the same bedroom as my brother. We shared a bedroom, and like being so angry at him one day, and he just threw a comb at my head, and I was very like, I remember standing my ground because I was so fed up of being like bullied by him, and he threw a comb and it hit me in my forehead, like right above my eye, and I remember I didn't move, and I just had tears in my eyes, and I was like, that hurt. I remember doing shit like that. And so in that sense, like it's actually a very realistic portrayal of a brotherly dynamic.
Well, okay, maybe I'm wrong, and then it is a perfect movie. But like there is so much I love about this film. You said you don't think the story is as good. I kind of think it is.
I don't think there's as much heart. There's not as much.
Okay, whatever. Yeah, sure. But like, I think like they're both really interesting stories, like ways to do the story, and especially because all my life I just assumed that Jumanji had the exact same plot as Zathura, but with the jungle. And so the thing of like a kid goes missing for 26 years, like that to me is the most interesting part of Jumanji, is that it's someone reappearing after 26 years missing.
Yeah.
But Zathura does the really nice, like, kind of what you said you liked about the first one. I didn't like so much about the first one. I think it's done better in Zathura of, like, here's a new threat every game, every turn kind of thing. And I love how, like, so this film was shot, like, entirely in sequence, and they just destroyed the house in real time. So it was like... You know, the media showers, okay, cool, we're fucking blowing up the living room today. And then we just leave it like that for the rest of the shoot because, you know, they don't fix it. And yeah, so like a lot of practical effects, and it made it a lot better, like for the child actors and stuff. It was also, I love as well that there's only like 6 or 7 actors in this film. There's like the dad, the 2 kids, Dax Shepard, the older sister, and Frank Oz voices the robot. That's it.
Yeah. No, you're right. That is a cool kind of thing about it. And what you said about the practical effects, I agree. It's a very, very kind of cool looking film if you're into like if you're a practical effects guy, then this is very rewarding, I think. And I think that is, again, another way in which it's definitely a better directed film than Jumanji, and that this is probably the clearest like director vision of any of them, of any of the Jumanji films. Is like Jon Favreau like really wanting to do something with it. The Zorgons, which are these lizard-like aliens which attack them, the way that they are sort of gradually revealed in the story is one, quite scary, but also like quite it's done very tastefully. Like you see like the snout of one of them at one point and stuff like that. It's very cool.
Yeah, and like this was the film he made immediately before Iron Man as well.
Right, there you go. One thing that I think is really funny in this film is that Dax Shepard, there's a plot twist at the end where it's revealed that Dax Shepard is actually Josh Hutcherson from the future, and in like the original timeline, he got given a wish by the game, a shooting star, and he wished his little brother was never born, and then couldn't finish the game, and so was stuck in the galaxy of Zathura for 15 years before finding them playing it again. And Kristen Stewart, who's been frozen for most of the movie, when she thaws out, she's like, oh my God, we're in space, what's going on? And then Dax Shepard at one point like pulls her out of the way of some oncoming danger and like looks her and says, stick with me and you'll be safe. And she like gazes up into his eyes and she's all like in love with him. And then
she says something like, I'll never leave your side or something like that.
Yeah. And then and an entirely separate plot beat, you find out that it's older Josh Hutcherson, in a way that it's not until everything is returned to normal that you go, wait, Kristen Stewart had a crush on him. And then, like, I like that they don't shy away from that. It's kind of icky,
like, well, when you find out it was him, there's a reaction shot of Kristen Stewart being like, oh.
Yeah, it's a great comedy beat.
And then at the end it comes back as well, which is like, I like that they weren't afraid to do that. That like they acknowledge that Josh Hutcherson remembers that and is like, and he makes some crack about.
He's like, "Do you still think I have dreamy eyes?" or something like that. God, imagine how you'd feel if you were
if you like admitted sister. You want to fuck your brother. Because also she says, like when she finds out, she's like, "Oh, I wanted to."
Yeah, man, it's great. I love that they include that in there. It's such an unkid friendly thing to put in your kid friendly movie. Yeah. Interestingly, though, Richard, in a true head-to-head of the governing forces that we usually use when deciding if certain nuanced entries in a franchise do in fact belong in the same franchise together, Jon Favreau doesn't consider Zathura connected to Jumanji. He didn't like Jumanji, and he said that...
It's so funny that it's just like, no, I don't really consider it a sequel. Why not? I don't like the first one.
Chris Van Allsburg, the author of the Zathura and Jumanji books, also says that Zathura is very different from Jumanji, but that doesn't necessarily mean the same thing.
So is Welcome to the Jungle.
They were produced by different companies, though, and marketed by the studios taking place in the same fictional universe. But, like, a lot of the stuff that we usually use to decide this is not lining up here. Like, the literal director, the word of God. Like, there are several conflicting words of God happening here. And what do you think, Richard? Who do you believe in?
I think it's one of the rare cases of something, like, and this is something that I feel like you always want to do, and I always resist. But, like, the retroactively folding something into a franchise. I think it's one of those things that was borderline enough when it came out, and now that the franchise has continued, and well, I mean, we'll probably get to this with continuing the franchise, but the way they were promoting the next level and being like, Zathura counts, I think it's going to come back in.
Right, that's film. A good call. Yeah, but I remember when Zathura came out, like, on my own, thinking it's Jumanji in space, but I also distinctly remember not seeing that officially said.
Yeah, 100%. I was like, they just ripped off Jumanji, right? Like,
yeah,
but
I remember wanting it to be.
Oh, it was based on a book that's a sequel to Jumanji. It was actually marketed as being part of it.
Yeah, I remember wanting it to be considered a Jumanji sequel, and I was annoyed that it didn't seem to be marketed that way. Jack Black, who we'll talk about a few times when it comes to what is this franchise in terms of, like, what entries count. He is weirdly very passionate about Zathura being part of the Jumanji franchise.
Yeah. Like, if I have to go with Word of God canon, I'm going to pick Jack Black.
Yeah. Yeah, I wrote here, though he is weirdly passionate about a lot of things, so maybe I shouldn't be that surprised. Speaking of Jack Black, though, Tim Robbins, who plays the dad in Zathura, walks past a Tenacious D poster in Kristen Stewart's room, which makes the original Jumanji the only movie in the series to not feature Jack Black in any capacity. And, for what it's worth, Tim Robbins would go on to play the stranger in Tenacious D, The Pick of Destiny movie. And in this same scene, Kristen Stewart, lamenting that her dad doesn't trust her dating boys, says, "We should have never rented 13, a film directed by Catherine Hardwicke, who'd go on to direct Kristen Stewart in Twilight." So there's like 3 or 4 unintentional idiosyncrasies happening in that one scene. Some that hadn't even happened yet. All of them hadn't happened yet. It's like one big signpost for
we
3 other films.
Rented 13 is such a funny line. I remember that. I remember 13 being a movie that, like, my sister watched around the age of 13 and was like, I don't think my parents were super happy about. But it is I'd be so interested to go back and watch that. Like, I don't think I've ever actually seen the movie, but I remember like the cover of it. I've seen bits of it, and at the time, I was like, you know, I if my sister was around 13, I would have been around 10. And I was like, fuck, these girls are so old, you know, like they're into drugs. Like, but the whole point of the movie is they're into drugs and alcohol and whatnot. But like watching that film,
it was a very exciting plot for a movie when I was 13. I would feel like it's illegal if I went back and watched it now.
But like, it would be so interesting to watch now being, you know, more than twice the age of these characters and being like, watching it through the lens of like, these are actually literal children.
Yeah.
I feel like it would hit differently. Not that I've actually already seen it the whole way through.
So even though the original Jumanji is the only one to not feature Jack Black, Zathura is the only film in the series to not at any point be set at Christmas, because the other three, the next level is like explicitly set at Christmas, whereas the other two, like the first one ends at Christmas, and I think the Welcome to the Jungle ends at Christmas
it ends
as well.
at Christmas, yeah.
Yeah. According to IMDb Trivia, Walter accuses Danny of cheating after noticing his piece is ahead. That's this whole thing where he's like, "You're cheating!" And then
because the whole thing is he's like, "I don't want to play the game with you because you always cheat." And Danny's like, "No, I'm not going to cheat." And then he does cheat, and it's like, "Did you not understand the stakes?"
Because Walter thinks he's cheated and then pulls his tile back, and then Walter gets ejected from the game for cheating that time. And then I kept waiting for it to like bring up how Danny didn't actually cheat in this case. The actor is playing it like he doesn't want to get in trouble, but then it never comes back to it, because why wouldn't Danny get also ejected?
Well, because the game wasn't looking.
Well, here's a piece of IMDb trivia which outlines what actually happens.
Right.
This is like a Battle of the Five Armies, who are the actual five armies situation. So Walter accuses Danny of cheating after noticing his piece is ahead of Walter's, when it was actually his piece that was ahead of Danny's. The sequence of the two boys' turns leading up to this point is as follows. Danny got a total of 28 turns, 5, 4, 7, 6, and 6. And Walter got a total of 37 turns, 9 plus move ahead 2 spaces, 8, 6 plus move ahead 4 spaces, and 8. Since he got the most amount of more turns than Danny, Walter's piece should be 9 pieces ahead of Danny's, proving that he did in fact cheat. So you're right, but like, why? I feel like it's like this weird. Empty...
Well, yeah. It's that. Yeah, it is a bit of a plot error, but it's. I don't know. I mean, I guess the only thing that it would be like that would make me think the game, like what the game considers cheating, would be that it was Walter touching Danny's piece. Because there is a whole thing, especially in the original Jumanji, there's a whole thing about whose piece is what, and you can't do anything with the other player's pieces. Yeah. But yeah, it would make sense in this one if it's like, that's why it fucked with Walter, because he was moving another player's piece rather than his own.
Right. We'll round off our discussion on Zathura with a couple of pieces of dumb IMDb trivia. Guess what most of the IMDb trivia for this movie is, Richard? Repeated over and over again.
What?
Is this a sequel to Jumanji? Or it's not! But here's some pieces that I picked up. Despite not being a sequel to Jumanji, there are, however, some references in the film. Here are what it lists as the references to it being related to Jumanji. 1. Both feature an event when landing on a corresponding space, and 2, the players must finish the game in order to return to reality. And that's all it lists. It lists 2 things when there are 100 things you can list that are similar about the films. Both are about a board game, for example. Both include a character who's been lost for over a decade, it's so funny. It's just like, it's like someone started that list and then got bored. And lastly, if you go on the IMDb trivia for this movie, one of the IMDb trivia says, Italian censorship visa number 99631 delivered on 13th of February 2006.
That early.
Not a fucking piece of trivia. What is this talking about?
Couple of
this
fun
is like
things.
I accidentally got in there.
Couple of fun things I've found out. This film also, like, it's worth mentioning, and I feel like we could keep talking about Zathura for ages, actually. Zathura, like, famously bombed at the box office, and and is considered, like, one of those movies that, like, no one went to see. There's a bunch of, like, reasons that you can talk to John Favreau. I'm sure he'd be happy to chat about why his film bombed. But
he has actually talked about it.
Yeah, he's talked about it a lot. That's what I was saying. That, like, if you ask Jon Favreau, he's got a number of reasons as to why he thinks the film bombed. I think it's to do with, like, the poor marketing, and there was another film that came out around the same time that usurped it, kind of thing. But one thing that they did do in attempts to push the name Zathura out there, which I've also just found out if you translate from Zulu to English, Zathura means silent. Which is actually like cool and works with the space theme. But they did a tie-in episode of The Apprentice. So that's right.
Film
Donald
franchise
Trump.
Follow-ups for our Patreon.
That would actually be a pretty interesting one if we could find it.
Yeah, let's do it.
So it's season 4, episode 5. John Favreau appeared as a guest judge, and the two teams were assigned with the task of designing and building a float to publicize the movie. And it was Favreau's first Comic-Con promoting the film.
Oh, there you go.
Yeah.
There you go. Good on you, Favreau. You tried, and that's all that matters,
Yeah, and you looked like you had fun making it.
Look where you are now.
Look at where you came from.
Look at you now. All right, so we'll move on now, Richard, to the movies that I think we both probably wanted to talk about more than the ones we have been talking about, which is, of course, beginning with Jumanji, Welcome to the Jungle in 2017. This was directed by Jake Kasdan, and this is our first Jake Kasdan film for film franchise Fortnights, though we have previously discussed Walk Hard, the Dewey Cox story over on Patreon.
And so on the main channel.
Oh, that's true. There's a
Patreon
we put it on the. There you go. What do you think this has on Rotten Tomatoes?
1 million.
Correct. It has 1,000,000%. Only film with 1,000,000% on Rotten Tomatoes.
Well, one of two.
One of two. The second one being the bench warmers for some reason. It's 76 on Rotten Tomatoes.
Oh, yeah.
Which is similar score to Pirates of the Caribbean, I believe. Whether they're like high but low for high score.
Yeah.
What is Jumanji Welcome to the Jungle about?
Well, Jumanji Welcome to the Jungle is about a group of teenagers who get given detention. And in detention, they find this video game called Jumanji. They play it, they select their characters, and then they are sucked into the video game. Now, and this is the hook of the film, they now are being played by avatars who are all, A-list actors. So you have Dwayne Johnson, who's Dr. Smolder Bravestone, who is the avatar for Spencer, who is like a socially awkward, nerdy kid with allergies kind of thing. So you have, now he's, embodied the Dwayne Johnson. You have Kevin Hart as Mouse Finbar, who is the backpack guy. He's a zoologist. That's like his main thing. So he knows a lot about all the animals you find in the jungle, and he carries all Bravestone's weapons. And then that character is Fridge, who's your kind of classic football player, like jock, and is friends with Spencer from way back, but they're not as close anymore. And so his whole thing is that he's, his character, he's a very like physically imposing kind of person, your typical quarterback kind of thing, and is put into the small body of Kevin Hart. It is worth mentioning as well, if you haven't seen the film, that Fridge, the real world person, is also black. And because it becomes more important in the next one. Then you have Jack Black, who is Shelley Oberon, the curvy genius, who cartography, so is the only one that can see the map inside the game. And yeah, it looks like Jack Black, so it wasn't exactly the best character to have in an adventure game. And Shelley Oberon is an avatar for Bethany, who in the real world is your classic, popular, vapid, self-obsessed hot girl in the body of Jack Black, obviously with comedic results. And rounding out that cast, we have Karen Gillan, who is Ruby Roundhouse, who's like the sexy femme fatale martial artist.
Lara Croft type.
Yeah. And she's the real world character is Martha, who's like a socially awkward, quiet, shy kind of girl. So in the game, they realize that they have to finish the game to achieve to get out of Jumanji. And while in there as well, they meet Nick Jonas's Seaplane McDonough,
Alex.
who's a pilot who is much in the same way as Alan Parrish in the first film. They find out is actually a kid who got sucked into the game in 1996 and is now been... And actually, like, kind of following on from where we leave the board game Jumanji at the end of the 1995 film, the game itself realizes no one plays board games anymore, which has now become a dated reference, and transforms itself into a video game to suck Alex Vreek into the game. And it's the same kind of thing of like, there's a house in this small town that people are like, yeah, that's where that kid fucking disappeared, and the family went crazy. And so, yeah, together they band together. They learn to love. They learn about themselves, and they achieve the mission.
The object of the game is to take the jewel of Jumanji and place it back in this big jaguar statue. And there's a villainous Bobby Cannavale after them, and they've got to put it back into the statue of the jaguar and call its name. Much in the same way that Robin Williams triumphantly shouted it at the end of the first film.
But in this film, it actually is like a... Yeah. Oh, it's okay. So... And also, Rhys Darby plays an NPC who guides them through the film.
In a rare occasion of like, yeah, fuck it, give that guy a New Zealand accent. That works fine.
Yeah. Welcome to Jumanji.
Welcome to Jumanji. There you go, everybody.
We've both done it.
You've got a genuine New Zealand accent too doing it now. But what do you think of Jumanji? Welcome to the
jungle. It's so good.
It's so good.
I remember what's okay. Flashback to 2016, probably 2016, maybe early 2017. So they said, we're making a new Jumanji film. Everyone said, fuck that. You know, like,
fuck you.
Because Robin Williams had died only a couple of years earlier. And it was like this, oh my God, you cannot touch Jumanji. They're casting Kevin Harden. Oh my God. And then a while later, this... the first image of it comes out, everyone in their costumes. And you're like, okay, well, Dwayne Johnson, we've seen him in a jungle fucking countless times. Jack Black's always fun. Okay, Kevin Hart. But then they're like, Karen Gillan, like, over-sexualized, like, oh, why would she be wearing that in a jungle? This film is going to be fucking terrible. Then the first trailer comes out, and I watch it, and I go, this looks pretty funny. And like, this looks pretty good. And at this point, I have zero attachment to the original Jumanji. I'm expecting everyone to go, and they kind of do at the time, go, oh, this looks like trash. Like, oh, this. And I read comments. Some people are like, actually, this looks kind of good. But, you know, they're expecting something from Jumanji. They're so attached to the original. And then the film comes out, and fucking, my God, it's incredible. It's like, it's one of the best cinema going experiences I've had in my entire life. Like, my initial review for it, the first review I wrote on Letterboxd said, this is the most fun you can have in the cinema without doing the old circle, the hole in the bottom of the popcorn trick.
Yuck, man. Fuck. It was 2017. It was a different time.
It's like right at the height of the Me Too movement as well.
Yeah, this is true. I mean, not that... If two consenting adults would cut
exactly. If they want to have fun in the cinema, do it.
I mean, it's also illegal, but that's a different issue altogether.
Yeah, but like, this is that, like, and like, I'm sure we're going to talk about this for ages, but I and you love this movie so much. It's a perfect film. It's oh my God.
Yeah. I legit think this is a perfect film. I say that without blushing. You know what I mean? Like, I think it's a perfect film. I think it's pure blockbust. If blockbust is a commodity, if it's an ore that you have to mine, that you have to tap into, I think this is like...
This is the mine.
This is the mine. I think it's super fun. It's a hilarious family adventure, the likes of which haven't been seen, I don't think, since the original Pirates of the Caribbean film. I remember watching this for the first time and being like, they haven't made a movie like this in like 15 years. Yeah. Like, it's almost a shame that it's like you've technically got to say that it's a sequel to other films, because it very easily could just be its own thing. It ostensibly is. It does so much new stuff that it's ostensibly the first original blockbuster adventure franchise since Transformers, maybe? I don't know.
Yeah.
what I love most about this movie, though, is that it's essentially an acting exercise. And it reminds me of high school drama, as in the class, not so-and-so kissed so-and-so. Like taking drama in high school where you'd get cast as characters like indiscriminately of what you physically looked like, Like in high school, I played friends' dads. I played an elderly psychiatrist for one thing. I played like a Tarantino-esque gangster. I played a witch once in high school, and this is the kind of luxury that you can't get away with in film ever. You can never do that in film, and you can't even really get away with it on like professional stage acting. Even that is like kind of cast to the person as well. And I think this film is an immensely underrated experiment of casting, where the challenge is actually to spectacularly miscast all the Avatar characters, which is really smart as well, because the 4 leads are all in real life like these seemingly blatant high school stereotypes. It's like literally the nerd, the jock, the popular girl, and like the weird shy girl. And because we're also universally familiar with those archetypes, they don't need that much setting up before we see them portrayed by their polar opposites, So Dwayne Johnson's the nerd now, like that's ridiculous, and like, or like they are literally like all. And it's like the obvious thing to do. They're all playing the opposite of the type of person they are, or that you would think of that stereotype. And if the characters were more original or nuanced, I don't think it would work. If Spencer wasn't just a nerd, if there was a little bit more to him, or if we saw that in the beginning, the body switch wouldn't read as well because it's too complex now. We need to know too much about the character. And so if you just think about them as like the most basic stereotypes, it's such an entertaining movie. And then through the avatars themselves, we actually learn that they aren't really stereotypes, and that ultimately the film is like a lesson in not judging people based on preconceived notions. Like, for example, there's a scene between Jack Black and Karen Gillan where they talk about how, like, oh, you would never like me because you're the popular girl, and I can't remember the lines exactly, but Jack Black basically talks about how like nobody takes her seriously, and it's such a nice touch to put in the movie that you totally wouldn't have had to put in the movie, and I would never have noticed, but to give substance to the characters and do it through fucking the guy from School of Rock is so funny and kind of beautiful in a way. And I actually think it's excellent, and I don't know why you and I seem to be the only people in the world that are this passionate about these 2 movies. People don't necessarily hate them, but like I don't think you're going to see a lot of other 5-star reviews for this on Letterboxd.
Like, oh my god, like they're so fucking good, and it's like the best performances, any of Kevin Hart's best performance and kind of The Rock's, are saved for the second film. But like, fuck, everyone is so good in these, and the thing is that like it's interesting because you do their stereotypes, and it is like when you've only got 5-10 minutes with the kids, you need to lean into those stereotypes a little bit to be like to the shorthand. Then the second film actually does something really interesting with that, which we'll talk about. But like, my god, Karen Gillan and the girl that plays Martha, is Martha, Morgan Turner, they're like incredible. It's actually like one person. It's insane. You forget you're watching. It actually is fully embodied the Avatar, and like and even Jack Black, who could just come to set, put on a bit of like of a Valley Girl kind of voice, and just say like totally whatever, Instead, there's all these little ticks, and we see them in Bethany. And there's such lived-in characters for something that, like you say, is like an acting exercise to just be like, just play, okay, The Rock, you're a nerd. And like The Rock, Dwayne Johnson, who's not even, necessarily the strongest actor, like there's so many small little things he's able to do that you're like, fuck, this is actually... Alex Wolff I'm watching, and even like Kevin Hart is clearly the weak link, and he totally has his time to shine in the second film, but
Kevin Hart, it's less of an acting thing and more of a character thing.
It's
the person in control is now second fiddle.
Yeah.
That's more what it's doing.
But watching the second film, watching them so close together, there is because you see a bit more of the real world Fridge, and you see Fridge and different characters. I think that it is one of those things where there's probably a little bit like they did in Looper, where it's like, okay, Sidarius Blaine, who is the real world Fridge, it's like you kind of have to be a bit Kevin Hardy so that he doesn't have to do as much work. Whereas, like, in Looper, it's like, okay, Josh Gordon-Levitt, you have to transform yourself into Bruce Willis because we want Bruce Willis. He's not, and he's not going to fucking try, you know?
Yeah.
But then, you like watching them now, because when I watched the first time, I just go, okay, and Kevin Hart's just Kevin Hart. There is actually a little bit of work done there that I appreciated watching this time.
Sure. Yeah. I've got some favorite moments that I want to just gush over in this film.
First of all, entire film. Oh my god!
I was going to say. First of all, Jack Black just steals the show. He's so good. He's so good. And I was thinking about this. It's interesting. Like, I don't fondly remember Rob Schneider in The Hot Chick, you know. So clearly, Jack Black is doing something a little bit more than just being a hot girl. You know, as you were saying, there's more to it. But my favorite scenes in this movie include Jack Black teaching Karen Gillan how to flirt because they've got to seduce some guards so they can get past them. And it's just this great scene where, like, it's clearly very improvised of Jack Black, and it's like Karen Gillan, who's like the stunning, beautiful woman, and Jack Black, and the power, again, it's high school drama. It's the power dynamic, you know, and it's such a fun thing to watch. And I'm sure I've said this before on the podcast, but I love the fish out of water character trope. I think you can mine that for so much beautiful character nougat, and this is a plethora of that. This is so much fish out of water, and that's kind of a scene that exemplifies that, where like you think about how practically they would have done that like Karen Gillan, who I'm sure is a very confident woman and probably very confident in her body, especially because of like what she's wearing in the film and like how she carries herself. Like there's something really endearing, and like it proves how good of an actress she is, that she can be wearing these clothes and looking great, but like kind of like hiding her midriff with her hands and like very clearly like playing insecure while not looking insecure. It's so good.
If you like, and you choose the high school drama thing, it's like if you see it, okay, walk from left to right, and you're insecure, that's your motivation. There's so many ways you would do that, but then when you're stuck in this like incredibly revealing outfit, and it's but also and as the film progresses, she kind of and that's one of the amazing things about the film as well, is that it actually has these like really positive messages about loving yourself, and it comes from like, so you know, for Spencer and Smolder Bravestone, it's like, no, the courage was within me all along.
You are the Rock. You always were the Rock.
Yeah, but for Bethany, it's like, no, it's not even like image isn't everything. It's more like you can be beautiful no matter what. Like, it's.
And it's that deconstruction of stereotype again, that it's like, it's all fucking made up, and you can be your avatars, or you can not be your avatars. And people are actually in love with who you are and not who you think, you know. And so I think all of that is kind of like exemplified in that scene where he's teaching how to flirt. Maybe I just think it's really funny to see someone who looks like Jack Black teaching someone who looks like Karen Gillan how to walk sexily. And
the idea of having a scene like imagine a scene on paper where you have Karen Gillan, gorgeous Scottish woman, and Jack Black. And it's like you give one line of dialogue and make a scene out of this, and you give the line to Karen Gillan and it says, I could never be as pretty as you.
Right. Yeah, totally.
And it's like, okay, make that work, and it's so good.
Yeah. My other favorite moment, a similar moment, is when Karen Gillan and Dwayne Johnson, who the characters have crushes on each other, when they confess their feelings for each other, and they kiss even though they don't know how. And it's so funny and it's sweet. By this point, I'm so invested in the characters as well. How often am I legitimately invested in a love story in a film, But
how often are you legitimately invested in The Rock?
Yeah, right. But in this, and they kiss and they're trying to use tongue, but it's just Dwayne Johnson and Karen Gillan mashing their faces together and sticking their tongues out. It's so funny, and oh my god, it's such a good scene, and I'm so glad this specific scene was conceived. Where of all the opportunities that the premise of this film gives you, I'm so glad that that's one of them. That it's because even Karen Gillan and The Rock, if they were playing love interests in a movie where they were just playing themselves, that would also be weird. So there's still a little bit of weird matching of lovers there. But again, it just exemplifies that fish out of water stuff, that acting exercise stuff. When I was writing up the plan for this episode, it took me ages to get to these movies because I was writing a bunch of other stuff first. And by the time I got here and I started writing, I was like, I don't actually have that much to say because it all just comes back to that endless enjoyment I get out of someone gave The Rock the best role he probably didn't know he needed. This is such an opportunity for any actor in this film to play the opposite of what you are and it be narratively earned and narratively justified. I also really love, we've talked about it a couple times already, so The Rock gets to the top of the big Jaguar statue. Karen Gillan's character loses her second to last life, and so she spawns in midair and starts falling back down to earth, and she's got the gem. They trade, they jump into the air and The Rock grabs it and she falls, and then he puts it in the head and nothing happens, and the bad guy's looking up at them what the hell, and then everyone goes, call its name, Jumanji, and Dwayne Johnson goes, Jumanji, and the camera pans back, and I want to cry. I know, cry.
I actually
it's
I
so
stand
powerful.
up and cheer. And also there's a moment, and I remember in the cinema everyone being say Jumanji.
Yeah.
Everyone's on the edge of their seat and so hyped up. But also one thing about that, and there's a lot of this in these films, and there's a couple of things I'll probably point out. But earlier on in the film, there's a bit where Kevin, and it's so funny when Kevin Hart drops the
oh my god, it's so
the jewel.
It's the funniest joke in the film. It's the funniest joke.
He drops the thing, and they're like, "Did you just drop the jewel?" And he's like, "Yeah." And it's crazy because I know we need that.
And it's how you word something when everyone's angry at you, but you're trying to circumvent that. Yeah, we're all really mad that this happened, eh?
Yeah.
I do that when I had a call from my landlord last year because our pallet fire started smoking, and so the fire department was called. We called the company, and a fire engine came, and it cost our landlord $2,000, and he called me up and he's like, this costs $2,000, and instead of apologizing or anything, I immediately was like, that sucks, man. Oh, what the hell? Why are they charging? I got on his side, and he's sort of this dopey old man, so I was able to circumvent that and stop him from being mad. It's not my fault. I'm there with you. I'm standing next to you being mad at the fire engine. But it's such a great
and the whole it's such a relatable thing. But that wasn't even my point of it, was that the way they kind of they get the jewel back is they're like, okay, well, Kevin Hart, you go down, grab the jewel, and then you'll die and we can grab you, which establishes for Karen Gillan that if you die, you still hold on to the gem. Because that's such a massive fucking risk to take at the end, that she kills herself while holding the gem to fall from the sky, which is why would you think that you would hold on to it? But we're shown earlier in the film that you do. And it's not even you never have a character realize this. It's just one of those plot hole proofing things.
Yeah, totally. It's such good screenplay, isn't it?
There's so much stuff like that where it's you didn't you didn't need to do this, or you might not even be fucking aware of how clever it is that you did this.
Yeah. No, but that Jumanji call It's if I could describe that in one word, it's cathartic.
It's Jumanji,
and that's it's cathartic. And catharsis is the best thing I think a movie can make me feel. Yeah. I think it's so magical, and it kind of evokes a lot of this movie when I'm cheering and when I'm nearly crying in this movie. It evokes like what it's like when you're on a game night and like you're playing a game with a group of people and you all get really invested into it. Like you can imagine playing a Jumanji-esque game and everyone screaming Jumanji at the, oh my God, it's so wholesome. Yeah. Do you have any other favorite moment? I've got some production stuff we can talk about, but are there any other sort of just things you want to gush over in this movie?
So much.
I like. It might come up again.
Oh yeah, the stuff will come up for the next level. I'll save it for the next level.
Okay. So I thought the same as you when you were like, you couldn't believe that you never see the jungle in the original Jumanji, right? Like I was thinking about that, and I was like, it's so surprising that it took over 20 years for any kind of big budget direct Jumanji follow up to happen. When it's like it's weird that it's not in the original Jumanji. That's weird that you don't show the jungle.
That a character spends 26 years somewhere.
That's so weird. So it's crazy to think that it never showed up. But according to a late 90s article, you can find this. Ain't It Cool News?
I'm so glad you have this.
A 1999 article, a direct sequel was in the works and planned for a 2000 release and would have involved John Cooper, the President of the United States, buying Jumanji from an old antique store in Europe and bringing it to the White House to play with his children, one of whom, Butch, just wants a dad, not a president, for a father. Cooper then gets sucked into the world of Jumanji, paving the way for his evil vice president, who is supposed to be played by Steve Buscemi, to rise to power as Cooper's replacement. Inside the game, Cooper would have teamed up with hybrid animals, which were going to be animated with CGI. So there was a in-jungle set Jumanji sequel.
I fucking love that. That's so interesting.
Really? I don't know.
I love that. Like we have such a detailed idea of what Jumanji 2 would have looked like, and it's like
right down to like the casting of the villain.
I find that so fascinating because I didn't know that till this week, but it's like, oh fuck yeah, like.
I really don't like the idea of the president being the main character. Right. It's a fictional president, but in anything, it's like I don't know if I want the president to be the main character. That's very relatable, fucking being the president. And especially like nothing in the story says that it needs to be the president of the United States.
The villain is. I'm sure the stakes would be high if you've got the vice president.
Sure, I guess so. Yeah, maybe. It's still like a kind of a left of field idea.
Well, it's also funny like having like an evil vice president. It's like you've chosen as your running mate, John Cooper.
So obviously this didn't happen, and as rumblings of the eventual film we got emerged in the early to mid 2010s, as you mentioned, there was a lot of outcry arose from doing a Jumanji reboot so soon after Robin Williams' death. And people did think this was a reboot for a long time. It just was called Jumanji. It had the working title Jumanji, but the final the title Welcome to the Jungle was actually suggested by Jack Black, who apparently was singing Welcome to the Jungle all the way through production, which is very funny, and I can imagine Jack Black doing that just because he's in a jungle.
Well, and also him and Nick Jonas wrote a theme song for the film. Did you ever hear that?
No, I didn't. I was reading about it though.
Yeah, it's like they would just do it on talk shows, and they made like a kind of shitty music video for it. Like I say shitty and like low budget kind of thing. But yeah, it was just like, you know, you have two musicians on set and they'll start to jam together, and they just made this like funny Jumanji song that they would perform on chat shows.
It is, of course, though, not a reboot and explicitly set in the same universe, for those who maybe don't remember. There's a part where they go to, like, Nick Jonas's little hut that he's built for himself, and he actually hasn't built it, because written on the plank is Alan Parrish was here, meaning he built this, which paints an interesting picture of what life would have been like in the world of Jumanji for Alan. But it's also interesting to note as well that, like, he wouldn't have been an avatar, because this was the board game version. So he would have just been his actual self, and somehow he survived in Jumanji. Like, it's pretty it's there. You know how like end of Endgame, Captain America returns the stones.
Yeah.
And we never see it, but it feels like this massive opportunity for a story, but we're not shown it. I get the same thing with Alan Parrish's time in Jumanji. Like, it feels like such an obvious thing to make a story out of, that the fact that it's not, they didn't do that is kind of strange, I think.
Look at that.
What's that?
It's a moth.
Is that a moth? You got him. How would you deal? You imagine if you went to Jumanji and you had to fight with all these like other moths and bugs.
Like, because you know the other thing about the original Jumanji is that for those not on the Zoom call, I managed to trap a moth on a piece of gaffer tape, which was actually suggested by Sarah Vowling, the fan of the show. So thank you, Sarah, because she mentioned, like, why did I not just kill the moth? Last time there was a moth, I cleaned it up with gaffer tape. She's like, why did you not just kill it with gaffer tape? So this time, for the first time since then, I've had gaffer tape on my desk.
Wow.
And I thought to do it. I really should just shut the windows in here. But what was I saying? Where were we? Oh, yeah.
Alan Parrish.
Oh, no, what you were saying about the original Jumanji, how they raised the stakes by, like, it now affects the whole town. If, like, you roll and there's moths, I would move towns.
Right.
It's the town's problem.
Yeah. The time travel stuff in general, I think, is such an understated but consistent rule across all the films. Like, you don't really think of these films as time travel films, but all four, Zathura included, have like you finish the game and time rewinds to before you start.
It's not even necessarily time travel. It's like a reset.
Yeah. And so I was just thinking about like and how it's kind of like Kirsten Dunst's character won't remember the original film, and then I found an interview with Jake Kasdan on Collider.
An
which
interview
I will
with
send you.
Kirsten Dunst. She's like, yeah, no, I remember filming Jumanji. You're like, she does.
I'll send you this interview because it was actually pretty interesting. It has a lot of. I'm going to go into it, but you might want to read it yourself. So here's what Jake Kasdan was asked about the time travel rules of Jumanji, and here's what he said. We've tried hard to stay kind of consistent with the set of rules that is stated in the first movie, but not really designed for the way that we're the design the way that we are. Sorry, the design in the first movie does not take into account the weird reconception that would happen 25 years later. Unsurprisingly, they don't remember it because they were not Alan Parrish. Alan Parrish remembers it. So in other words, Robin and Bonnie's characters remember it because they were the ones who emerged with the memory intact, and that way that's the way the first movie ends because they have emerged at that time that they have entered the game. The way we've tried it, the way we've sort of played the role also, right? So, which is like you come back out of the time you went in, they are able to preemptively prevent the kids from having that experience in the first movie. Do you see what I'm saying? So the kids show up in the town at the end of the first movie, they recognize them, and there's a scene where they tell the parents don't go on a ski trip. Then there's this moment at the very end where they alter the course of present day life in the original Jumanji 1996, right? And prevent the kids from ever having the experience of playing the game. Whereas they had the experience as the kids 25, 30 years before Bonnie and Robin's characters. They remembered what happened. You follow? Like, and it's convoluted, but it's like, Jake Kasdan, that's real cool. That, like, there was obviously a meeting.
He does call it Jumanji 1996, and it came out in the last couple of weeks of 95. But, that's cool. And I love these things where it's like, because so often I feel like you get directors who are like, oh, I don't care, like, you know, whatever. It's like you get this with like Tom Hiddleston as Loki, that you see interviews of people talking about the MCU, like people like stars of the MCU, and they haven't really watched the other films, or they kind of like they don't really follow things. And Jeff Goldblum does this as well, where like they really like actually enjoy the films they're in, and like like obviously you liked the project enough to be attached to it, but like Tom Hiddleston is like an MCU fanboy. You see Jeff Goldblum talking about like any film he's been in, and he like remembers filming them, and he remembers scenes he wasn't in, you know. And like the one that's jumps out to me about Jeff Goldblum is there's like this there's some obscure Jurassic Park game where it ends with like an FMV of Jeff Goldblum on a beach, and someone asked him about this, and he remembered filming it. Whereas like any other actor, I feel it would be like, "What am I in this game? What the hell?" Like, but he was like, "No, yeah, we were on set, and they pulled us aside, and they brought in a different director, and he said, "Kid," and yeah, it's like." It's such a cool insight that I feel like no other actor would be able to give you.
It is interesting. He did that, like, just read the Steamed Ham script, and it's like, I would be so scared to ask a world famous celebrity to read something that long and that stupid, and just for them to know I was going to do something silly with it as well.
Yeah, but even that, he's like. He's like, oh, what is it? He's like, and he mentions it's from The Simpsons. He's like, oh, they're incredible writers. Like, because I mean, he was on The Simpsons. We spoke about on a Patreon episode, but I'm just in awe of Jeff Goldblum, especially like that specific. It was the same interview where he did it might even be the same actual like interview where he did the steamed hams thing and he did the thing about that FMV, but it was like the press tour for like a new Jurassic World game. It wasn't even like for Jurassic World Fallen Kingdom that he's in. And they just sent Jeff Goldblum on the press tour for it. And it's like all these little nuggets are so good. Anyway, that's enough about Jeff Goldblum.
Well, hey, no, Jeff Goldblum for Jumanji 5. It's either Jumanji 3 or 5.
5 or 8.
In researching the character of Bethany, Jack Black went to Madison Iseman, who plays the real version, and asked her about her favourite music and TV shows, and watched and listened and got into that headspace. I couldn't find any confirmation that all the actors did this, but I would hope so, right? Like, especially with Karen
Gillan and Morgan Turner, 100%. Like, that feels, it almost feels like, hey, can I film you doing the entire movie, and I'll do that. Like, yeah, it's so good.
Yeah. Nice. I've got one piece of dumb IMDb trivia before we can move on to the next level. And this is interesting. This might be the first example of a piece of dumb IMDb trivia that's dumb because it made me feel dumb.
Wow. So it's smart IMDb trivia.
It says Van Pelt is actually made up of the vermin and rodents, the grossest animals you can imagine. They inhabit his body. And at first I was like, why are they talking about the bad guy from the original Jumanji and Jumanji Welcome to the Jungle? And then I was like, oh my God, Bobby Cannavale is also Van Pelt.
Yeah.
I did not realize that till today, that they're supposed to be the same character. And it makes sense that they would look different as well, because he's supposed to replicate someone who scared you in the original film, right? So maybe this is his true form. But that's like the only way that this movie broaches being in reboot territory is that they recast the villain.
Yeah, but
it's like a completely different interpretation of the villain. It's just the name is shared. But like, yeah. I never picked up on that until now. Did you know that?
I saw it on the Jumanji franchise page about an hour ago.
Did it blow your mind?
So I did know before now. Yeah.
Yeah, man,
and
that's crazy.
it was like I guess, yeah.
Yeah, me who's seen the movie like 20 times and you who's seen it twice, I was like, whoa! And you're like, oh, yeah. Any more thoughts on Welcome to the Jungle?
I want to, but let's move on.
All right, well, we got Jumanji The Next Level in 2019. This was also directed by Jake Kasdan, which makes it our second Jake Kasdan film for film franchise Fortnights after Jumanji Welcome to the Jungle.
Wow.
What do you think this has on Rotten Tomatoes?
What was the last one, 75?
76 was the last one.
I would guess 81.
It's got 71, so it's actually rated less than the previous film. And what is this movie about?
All right. So this is set a couple of years after the previous film. They're all now out of high school, and our four main characters, the real world teens, have split up, but they keep in touch, kind of thing. Spencer is now feeling that he not feeling his usual self, as the boost of confidence he got from Jumanji has kind of disappeared, and he thinks to himself, well, maybe I should go back to Jumanji and become Smolder Bravestone again. Also, he's now Spencer's grandfather, played by Danny DeVito, has visited, and then his name's Eddie, and then Eddie's former business partner Milo shows up out of the blue, played by Danny Glover.
Their relationship has fallen apart.
Yeah, they haven't seen each other in 15 years.
Yeah,
and then so the remaining teens from the first film go. We got to save Spencer. We got to go into Jumanji, and then unknowingly, Danny Glover and Danny DeVito, no relation, are are sucked into the game as well. Bethany isn't actually as well. So you have Martha and Fridge are sucked into the game, and Danny DeVito and Danny Glover. Martha keeps the same. She's still Ruby Roundhouse. However, now Fridge is Jack Black, Shelley Oberon, which is like where the kind of thing that it's important that like he's like, what now? I'm the old fat dude. At least I was black last time. At least I'm still black. And I do want to talk about the like Jack Black playing a black character.
It's written down. Don't you worry.
And then
it wouldn't be a Cold Popture podcast without discussing that, Richard.
And then now The Rock, Smolder Bravestone is Danny DeVito, and Kevin Hart's Mouse Finbar is Danny Glover. So they have to go through the game. They think they're going to go in there just to do the same things, but now that it's the next level, things have changed.
It's another gem that they've got to put on.
It's ostensibly the same thing, but now we're seeing they start in like in a desert, and then they move to like a snow area. But they run into a new character, a new avatar played by Awkwafina, and who's incredible. Who's a thief. Our second Awkwafina thief franchise. After Ocean's 8. And they find out that that's Spencer, and then they all team up. But then Bethany and Alex Vreek from the first film, they try again to get into the game. Eventually, Alex comes in under Seaplane McDonough again, and now Bethany is a horse. But then as they enter the final act of the film, they all become their rightful ones, and the ones they were for the first film, and now Awkwafina is Danny DeVito and Danny Glover is the horse.
Yeah,
and the villain in this one is Jurgen the Brutal, and they have to like get into his thing, and yeah, so get a gem shot to the sky. At the end of the film, they all learn their lessons, but Danny Glover's character, who's now a horse, revealed to be a Pegasus, decides that he actually wants to stay inside the game. It's ostensibly to live forever, because
he's revealed to be dying. About 20 minutes earlier.
Yeah. And now he can live as a horse with a massive penis.
Well, they don't go into that part, but
they do.
And
they do. Awkwafina says you should see the size of it.
And it ends with the teens and Danny DeVito going to the cafe that Danny DeVito and Danny Glover used to run together, and it's now run by a woman named Nora, who was in the first Jumanji movie. A returning character, which doesn't really mean much because she didn't remember.
It's this weird thing where it's like, I did. You told me after, because we saw this film together actually, a double feature actually. We watched this and Cats back to back, because they both came out on the same day. Yeah, like from the way the character's revealed, I could tell from context it was probably a character from the 95 one, and the way people went. But watching the 95 one, I didn't even remember what character it was, and then watching it again, I was like, okay, which one's Nora? Because I know there's a Nora at the end of Next Level. And it's like the most obscure character to bring, not the most obscure character to bring back, but it's like, it's such a random character. She's the aunt of Kirsten Dunst and her brother's character.
It probably should have been Bonnie Hunt.
Yeah, it should have been Bonnie Hunt.
Yeah. Because she remembers everything.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, well, like it absolutely should have been Bonnie Hunt. But that doesn't count as a flaw. This is a perfect film. But yeah, you go.
Okay, so then the game is reactivated again, unbeknownst to the main characters, by Lamorne Morris in a cameo that we can talk about. And it ends with them leaving the diner, and then a bunch of ostriches run past, and it's a cliffhanger ending that now Jumanji has escaped, like it's out in the real world now. So a little bit more, maybe a little bit more complicated of a plot to relay, but there it is. What do you think of this movie?
I fucking love this movie. It's so good, man. It's so fucking good. And and watching it again, like, because a lot of people were like, yeah, I liked Welcome to the Jungle, but the next one wasn't as good. It fucking is. It's so good, man. So obviously Karen Gillan and Jack Black were like the standouts of the first film. Like, they're the ones that are like, wow. And then in this one, like, The Rock and Kevin Hart really get their time to shine. They're so good in this film. Kevin Hart especially, like, for being kind of the weak link in the first one, is now like the funniest one, playing Danny Glover. And it's so interesting. I want to talk about this. And this is one of these things that I do this all the time, where I just brag about how I knew something beforehand. But I remember, like, when this film was announced, and this was again when I was looking through our messages to find when you told me that you don't see the jungle and Jumanji. That it was like, because I remember it's like Danny DeVito cast in Jumanji sequel, and everyone was like, what the fuck? Okay, he must be in the game. And then it was like Danny Glover was cast, and I said to you, and I was like, and I said, I reckon they're going to have old people going into the game. And I said, because you can do high school stereotypes in the first one and just be like, okay, we immediately recognize these. Whereas you kind of expect older characters to be a bit more defined. So you pick actors that have quirks. You know, we know what Danny Glover's speech sounds like. We know what Danny DeVito's speech sounds like, and you can be like, okay, it's Danny DeVito, and then you can do the whole rest of the movie without having to really embody a character. You're just embodying Danny DeVito. And you said that, oh, that's a cool idea, but it probably won't happen.
Like, it's the same idea of embracing and deconstructing stereotypes that makes the first one so good, but instead of high school stereotypes, it's like famous actor typecasts, you know? And so you see Dwayne Johnson play Danny DeVito and Kevin Hart play Danny Glover. It requires a knowledge of what those actors are usually like. It's not a particularly, it's a pretty well known what those actors are like, especially Danny DeVito.
When I said you the messages about my theory for the next level, I said, if Christopher Walken's cast next, I'm right.
I don't think it doesn't necessarily have the same purpose of being like, see, maybe not everyone is what you preconceive them as, because it's like, it's not a popular girl who's actually deep. It's Danny DeVito. But it's still the thing where if DeVito or Glover were playing anything more than the character types that we expect of them, then it wouldn't work. It's that same thing where it's like, you can't make Spencer more nuanced than just a stereotypical high school nerd, because then it doesn't work. And you can't make Danny DeVito play an un-Danny DeVito-like role, because then it wouldn't work. I was very nervous leading up to this film, and it's interesting that you found that message, because that is sort of where I was at, because I was like, the first one's lightning in a bottle, and I think I read an idea on Reddit where someone was like, they should bring back they should have new characters but keep the like star-studded cast. So it's completely new characters, but it's the same A-list avatars, and so it's a new set of fun and different characters.
Now this time Dwayne Johnson's a girl.
Yeah, exactly. But I surprisingly prefer what we got here, which I say surprisingly because, like, things like when we were talking about The Mummy 1999, and I pitched, it wasn't my idea, but the idea that that the sequels to The Mummy should have been the other Universal monsters, and it's like, I would much prefer that to The Mummy Returns. This is an example where, like, I got it in my head what I wanted the sequel to be, and it wasn't what I wanted it to be, but I prefer what it was. That's very rare that happens, and I think I watching them back this time, I'm surprised at how invested I am in the teen characters. Like Spencer, Martha, Fridge, and Bethany, I actually really like the characters, and I think maybe I forgot that in between the two films when they came out, so that when the second one came out, I didn't remember how much I actually really was invested in who they were as characters, and who they were as people. I think it's very telling, and this is so crazy to think that Danny DeVito actually physically, like Danny DeVito the actor, wouldn't have been on set for that. He probably could have done all his scenes in a day. He is not in the film that much because his presence is felt the whole time. And it's mind-blowingly a testament to how good of an actor Dwayne Johnson is, that it feels like Danny DeVito's there the whole time.
And it is this thing that you actually forget you're watching Dwayne Johnson and Kevin Hart. But I will say, though, that, like, because watching the second one, and you and I were sending each other these jokes back and forth, being like, it's weird watching this film being like, can he act? And it's like, but then, and you're like, hey, fuck, he's doing such a good job. And then Danny DeVito's character goes into the avatar of Awkwafina, and it's 100 times better. And it's like, and I do not get me wrong, Dwayne Johnson is so good in this film.
It's the performance of his career. It's such a
like,
weird
even
thing to
that
say,
feels like, that's insulting. Like, it's like, it wasn't hard. It's like he's genuinely incredible in this film, not just by his standards. But Awkwafina's like fucking phenomenal.
Yeah, everyone does say great Danny DeVito. It's very good.
Yeah,
it's very good. I think it's such a inspired way to make this a sequel, and like a sequel to an idea like the first one feels like destined to not be that good. But everything about the film is just this fantastic evolution of Welcome to the Jungle's ideas, and it kind of makes me want to say it's a perfect sequel.
It is a perfect sequel.
Sorry, like it is though. Like maybe others don't. Maybe you're listening to this and you don't get it, right? You didn't like the first one as much as we did, and so maybe you don't think it's a good movie, or maybe you don't like the general idea, or maybe you don't think you don't really get the hype that we're bringing this. All of those can still be true. All of those things can still be accurate. But in terms of like the art of sequeling, whatever that means, this is an A+, if you ask me. Like, this is taking the gimmick of the first one that makes it so good and putting an interesting spin on that. And it is also taking the character arcs from the first film. And it's an underrated thing about this film, but it is kind of cool that it deals with like what someone like Spencer would feel like coming out of that and living his life after being Dwayne Johnson, and how he yearns for that. That's a really, really cool way to take this. And I also really like the fact that Danny DeVito and Danny Glover's characters, what are their names? Eddie and Milo. Like, I feel like their character arcs get more screen time than the teenagers. And that to me is really interesting. And their character arcs basically learning to forgive each other because DeVito feels betrayed that Glover left the business before DeVito was ready. And I just think it's like, it's a great way to tell a story that's intrinsically about the elderly. It's like Up, how everyone, like, that's one of the things Up gets praised for, is that, like, how often are there stories that are like these beautiful kind of character pieces about an old person. Old people get so constantly looked over in society, but you get something like The Next Level, or like I read a thing once about how like a lot of representation of the elderly in The Simpsons is actually really appreciated and really revered, because it doesn't shy away from like their struggles and still presents them as like living and conscious and like sexual beings as well. And in this, it's similar to that, where it's like, this is a story about two men in their 70s who have had a falling out, and it's not told with two men in their 70s, but it's still really cool and effective, I think. And also, like, so similar to the gym thing I mentioned from the last film, it has a few more of those kind of things of like, if you thought about this, that's incredible. It's these little problem solving things, because so one of them is that, like, I love in Welcome to the Jungle that the characters immediately work out what's happening. They go, we must be sucked inside the video game. These tattoos must be our lives. This must be this must be, and like, because I've said this before, that I get really frustrated in films when people are like, no, there's no zombies, I don't believe it. It's like, oh god, there's fucking, like, it's obvious what's happening, especially when you rewatch a film. But they deliberately don't have it in the first film, but they still have those jokes. They're just in the second film, and now you have, like, you see you have these two old characters. You can do, like, boomers don't understand technology, or they're probably even old. Well, are they older than boomers?
No, around the age.
They're technically boomer aged, yeah.
Yeah, like they don't understand technology, but then you also have all the like, oh wow, I must just be in a coma kind of stuff that feels natural to something like this. But then you have these two seasoned veterans of it who are like who can just explain it, and so you can move on.
Yeah.
But, and then the other thing, and
you also don't have to wait for them to catch up because the seasoned veterans are there.
Yeah, exactly.
They just have to drag the other. Like halfway through the movie, they mention it being a game, and Dwayne Johnson goes, "We're in a game," and it's like one of the best jokes of the movie because it's like it's a very funny idea that someone is halfway through this movie and doesn't understand what's going on yet.
Yeah. The one other thing, and you said that it was written down as a note. So what have you got to talk about the Jack Black thing?
Okay, so we have what is now almost a very awkward situation in this, where Jack Black plays Fridge for 3/4 of the film. They switch back for the last act, but he's playing Fridge for most of it. And it is something that feels eerily similar to blackface. And since the film came out at the end of 2019, this film came out, it feels very much like it eked across the line, like the world's exploding, right? It's Rick O'Connell running his son into the pyramid of light as the shade is chasing him. Not that I don't take that stuff seriously, I do. But it is, I guess it's more of like it's very interesting to me. It's that like if this movie was scheduled to come out 6 months later, I think it would have undergone reshoots. I think it would have undergone major reshoots because whatever you're about to say about it, I have a feeling you're going to maybe say defend it a little bit, which is cool. But like even...
I will just say, though, that you're racist before you do that.
No, not at all. I'm saying like regardless of what your opinion on the fact that Jack Black is playing a black guy in it, it's still something that Hollywood would definitely go like, no, we are not releasing this now. And yeah, because he's doing an impression. Like they all are. Yeah. It's just Jack Black happens to be doing one that's maybe stooped in some racist stuff. And at one point they swap bodies with Karen Gillan as well, and so she does it as well. And I love that the movies has the characters swap avatars. Yeah. I love that. The question is, it's what it always comes down to. It's the most heartbreaking thing you can ask a progressive film buff is this joke worth it? It may be excellent written down on paper, but in terms of like social justice,
okay. So this is kind of what I wanted to talk about because it is like, and I think it's actually quite a restrained in terms of like the like ebonics of like doing a black voice. I was doing quotation marks, but
I think you can call it that. I've heard it called black speak. Like it's the accent.
Yeah. Like
I'm sure we've done it on this podcast in like a 2017 episode. I'm just saying it's a very new realization. I wasn't aware that it was problematic until the last couple of years.
Well, but yeah, it's like there's the. He's not doing what you would do if like the jive talking, like no. He's not just doing that. It is what it's lines written for Fridge filtered through Jack Black without him necessarily. So like it's more about and I think this is actually probably something that Jack Black would have worked on, how to not make, I'm not just doing vocal blackface. It needs to be like because there's stuff like when he's like, how is this guy a character in an adventure game? Man, it is hot out here. And it's like you could so easily just do that up a bit more, but it's like, okay, this is how it would sound coming from this character's voice box, but Fridge is in control of how loud each word is, the pitch of each word, the staccato hits of it. And it's like, and it's towing a fine line. But also, the other thing that I think is like one of those, again, it's like they probably did think about this, is having like a race-swapped avatar in the second film and not in the first film is such a good move, because you establish the rules in the first film, and then you do it for the second one. Now it's like, like now we're doing this because this is what we do in these films. If this was in Welcome to the Jungle, it would have received backlash. If you go, Jack Black's playing a black guy, okay. But in this one, it's like, yeah, Jack Black was a girl in the last film, and now and it's like I think that it's like they kind of were able to have their cake and eat it too because they reserved it for the second film.
Yeah, sure. Yeah,
because
yeah.
it's the same thing of like why everyone's like the society seems to just be okay with Robert Downey Jr. doing blackface in Tropic Thunder is because of all the context surrounding it. That it's like he's playing a character doing blackface. The character.
It is all about context, and it's like, you know, you isolate a clip from this movie and have Jack Black saying like, "Man, at least I was black last time." It's like, like out of context.
Yeah.
That must be damning. And once again, I reckon they wouldn't have done it had this film been delayed a little, for what it's worth. And like ultimately, you know, it's not up to you or I to say
exactly
it's good or not.
But I think it's one of those things where it's like, if you'd asked Jake Kasdan or even Jack Black mid 2020, like, hey, that was kind of weird that you had Jack Black playing, like, you know, doing the black speak in a film last year, they would probably be like, yeah, and maybe would maybe do it differently now. Like, you know, one of those things where it's like they would own up to it, but I don't think they would necessarily say what they did was wrong, you know?
Maybe like tone down the accent a little.
Yeah.
Stuff like that.
But I think if you just ask them now to reflect on it, they wouldn't take it back. Like a lot of people, you know, did say like I was wrong to have done that at the time. I think they wouldn't go that far, but they would accept that there's maybe conversations that need to be had around it.
Yeah. Rewatching these films, I gave this one 5 stars, as well, and I think for all intents and purposes, I like them as much as each other.
Yeah,
like, I don't think I have a favorite. But I do think there are more individual scenes I like in Welcome to the Jungle. I'd be pressed to list the same kind of like thing, like specific moments I enjoyed from this one as I did, you know, like how I was talking about like teaching how to flirt and stuff like that. Like, there's nothing I can really point to in this one as being like little nuggets that I really liked. But that's not even to say I prefer it. And I'm going to unashamedly compare it to The Godfather 1 and 2 here, in that they're both excellent. I just maybe happen to like one perfect thing for doing something perfect more than another perfect thing for doing something similarly perfect. I would say, though, I definitely do prefer the character arcs in the second one. So therefore, maybe what I'm saying is like, it's like the first one's got the individual moments I love, whereas the second one has more meaningful character arcs, I think. But yeah, do you have any thoughts on preference or anything like that?
I will say my favorite line across both films is when Kevin Hart as Danny Glover says, "Oh my God, did I just kill Eddie by talking too slow, like he always said would happen?" It's so funny that like, because just the way he talks in the film is so funny. But then also like the fact that he always said would happen. Oh my God, that's so good. What a good line.
Yeah, I love it. I also love Jürgen the Terrible. Is that Barbara's boy? It's like kind of a cheap old man line, like a cheap shot as an old man line that works so well.
Yeah, like the character's so mild-mannered and just it's so good.
Yeah. Do you have any other favorite moments in this film that you want to shout
not
out
necessarily
to?
a favorite moment, but just something I want to shine a light on, that I actually really like, because obviously you get a cast like this, and it's also like Nick Jonas is like the Y if all the others are vowels. It's like, yeah, and also Nick Jonas is there too, but it's like you would expect him to be the weak link, and it's like he kind of is, sure, but
it's not a character that needs to do anything though. It's
yeah, exactly. And so like in the first film, like he's the one who we don't really meet the character beforehand, but he throws in some bits of 90s slang, which is how they realize that he's been there for 26 years. But he actually does quite a good job, and it's very subtle in this film that it's like this is the same character, but he's now a dad, and it's like. Sure. And it's one of those things I wouldn't have expected Nick Jonas to be able to bring this to the table, but it's like he just has a slightly different demeanor about him that you get from being 26 years older, and he makes dad jokes and stuff, which is obviously baked into the script, but like the way he reacts, and again, it's like the kind of it's a smaller version of it, but with Danny DeVito and Danny Glover, that now he's playing Colin Hanks, and it's like Colin Hanks, isn't necessarily an actor that has all these super defined quirks, but yeah, he actually does a pretty good job. There's a few times when he does like just a look or something. I'm like, yeah, that's Colin Hanks.
Nice. Yeah, no, I totally agree. Apparently, Tom Holland was originally cast as Seaplane.
Interesting, yeah. He would probably do a really good job, actually.
Yeah.
But also, oh my god, like adding Awkwafina, so good.
Yeah,
she's incredible in this film.
Yeah. So Lamorne Morris shows up at the end of this film. He's an incidental character who shows up on the screen, and you basically ask yourself, like, do I only think this guy's famous because I've seen New Girl and this is the type of role he lands all the time, or is it like are they trying to set up a new character? And it's sort of a mix of both. Him and Jake Kasdan are actually friends, and basically they needed someone to come along to the script reading and fill in for a bunch of characters, and they got to the end of the script, and Lamorne Morris was like, "Is anyone playing this character? Have you cast the guy at the end yet? The repairman?"
So cool. That's such a good
That's how he got the job. And Jake Kasdan, in the same interview that I was talking about with Collider, is like gush. He's like, it's like my favorite scene in the film is Lamorne Morris being like, "Is that a video game console?" Which is such a funny thing to say, and warmed my heart, because it's clearly like the friendship between them is enhancing the scene for Jake Kasdan, because it's a relatively unnotable scene beyond the casting outside of that. But he's like, it's one of my favorite scenes in the film.
Yeah, that's I love that, man. That's so nice. But yeah, like, and because it's one of those things that you think about that like a heater repairman shows up at the end of the film and is just like, oh, let me look at this like broken thing. It's such a weird thing to do, but the fact that like Jake Kasdan and Lamorne Morris find that hilarious as well is just like, they're on the joke of how weird it is for a heating repairman to be like, is that a video game console?
We've got one piece of dumb IMDb trivia before we can move on to the segments. This is what it says on the IMDb page for Jumanji in the Next Level. The real-world characters from the last film are all credited as young. Young Spencer, young Bethany, etc. Colin Hanks is credited as young Alex, even though he is older than the Avatar played by Nick Jonas.
That's interesting.
So that's fun. All right, Richard, we're now moving on to randomly placed useless statistics, a segment that I put way too much work into, and you're about to find out why. Again, if you never heard the show before, this is where we look back at the previous franchises we've covered and look for little fun connections. So get ready for this, because this took me 90 minutes to write, to verify and write. All right, so Jumanji as a franchise, Richard, is our third Kirsten Dunst franchise after Bring It On and Spider-Man, our fourth Bonnie Hunt franchise after Beethoven's Toy Story and Monsters, Inc., our second Jonathan Hyde franchise after The Mummy. He's the "no, you must not read from the book" guy from The Mummy, and he plays Van Pelt / Mr. Parrish. It is our second Kristen Stewart franchise after Twilight, our second Tim Robbins franchise after he appears as the president in Austin Powers, The Spy Who Shagged Me, our third Dwayne Johnson franchise after Fast and Furious, The Mummy / Scorpion King, our fourth Kevin Hart franchise after Scary Movie, Meet the Parents, where he was in Little Fockers, and his cameo in Fast and Furious Presents Hobbs and Shaw, our fourth Jack Black franchise after Kung Fu Panda, The Muppets, where he has a brief cameo in the 2011 movie, and
it's not brief. He's probably one of the more featured ones.
And he was also in I Still Know What You Did Last Summer, which I'd completely forgotten about. This is our second Karen Gillan franchise after the MCU, and our third Bobby Cannavale franchise after the MCU and Daddy's Home, our fourth Danny DeVito franchise after after Romancing the Stone, Look Who's Talking, and his brief appearance in Austin Powers Goldmember, where he plays the Hollywood version of Mini-Me. It is our second Danny Glover franchise after Lethal Weapon, our second Nick Jonas franchise after Camp Rock, arguably our second, though soon-to-be fourth Awkwafina franchise after Ocean's 8, and if you count it, even though the film she was in was released after the film franchise Fortnights episode, she's also in SpongeBob SquarePants Sponge on the Run, and she's going to be in the MCU and the Little Mermaid franchises within the next year. So she's bumping from 2 to 4. And finally, though... And finally, I'm sure there are more, but this is our second, though arguably third, Robin Williams franchise after Happy Feet, and if you count it, the SpongeBob SquarePants movies, where he was in like Atlantis SquarePantis or Truth or Square or something. We watched it for the podcast, but I don't think we count it.
We've kind of decanonized it.
Yeah. This is our sole Bradley Pierce franchise. He played Peter in the original one, though he did voice Flounder in the Little Mermaid TV series. So maybe that counts. This is our second franchise in a row where a character dies and is brought back to life via CPR, even though you wouldn't really expect CPR to work if someone died the way they did in the film. After Fear Street, where someone is brought back to life via CPR through getting stabbed in the stomach several times. And in this, Nick Jonas gets bitten by a mosquito, which is his weakness, and he dies, and Bethany performs CPR on him, bringing him back to life at the cost of one of her own lives. But
in the game, it's very much like a performing CPR is how you give someone your life.
It's earned in Jumanji, yeah. This is our second franchise to feature a sequel to a Jonathan Hyde movie, which unprompted stars Dwayne Johnson after The Mummy.
Unprompted.
Well, it's just like
how do you prompt like at the end of the first film? It's like Dwayne Johnson will be in the sequel.
I mean, it's not like the obvious. It doesn't naturally carry on and be like, oh, so of course you'd cast Dwayne Johnson. You know?
If only Jonathan Hyde was in Fast and Furious as well. Although I guess that is prompted, isn't it? If that's your metric.
Yeah. Jack 3, the third game in the Jack and Daxter video game series, is seen being played in Zathura along with a poster of the game on the boys' bedroom wall, which makes this our second franchise after The Little Mermaid to have a Jack and Daxter connection, as Max Casella, the voice actor for Daxter, voiced the penguin in The Little Mermaid 2, Return to the Sea. For what it's worth, we also see a poster for Uncharted 4, A Thief's End, in Jumanji Welcome to the Jungle, which is also a game developed by Naughty Dog, who made Jack and Daxter.
Yeah, I can see why this took you 90 minutes.
That's the first one that took me 90 minutes. And of course, if it hasn't already been brought up by now, while not specific to the podcast, this is Dwayne Johnson's third film to feature the word jungle in the title, and the second to just be titled Welcome to the Jungle. The Rundown, which as it was called in the US, was released in New Zealand and other regions as Welcome to the Jungle. The other jungle movie with jungle in the title is Jungle Cruise, which came out this week. Yeah. He is also seen in a jungle setting in The Mummy Returns and Journey to the Mysterious Island, which also stars Josh Hutcherson, who is in Zathura, and is a sequel to Journey to the Mysterious Island, which starred Brendan Fraser, making it the second time. So, yeah, what did I say? I'm getting too excited.
You're getting too hyped up.
Journey to the Center of the Earth, which stars Brendan Fraser, and if you can call The Scorpion King a sequel, which in broad terms it is, it's the third time he's been in a sequel to a Brendan Fraser movie, and the second time he's been in a sequel to a Brendan Fraser movie, which didn't see Brendan Fraser reprise the role. Is that statistics for The Scorpion King and not Jumanji? Yes. Also, Nick Jonas plays a character named Alex, and my name is Alex Jones, and my brother's name is Nick Jones. So, whatever.
Nick Jones.
It's not really a statistic. No, but my brother's name is Nick Jones. So, Nick Jonas plays Alex. Anyway, there you go.
Very good. Is that all of them?
That's all of them.
Wow.
You told me you had a personal piece.
Yeah, one that I've thought about a few times, but I just finally decided to work out. This is the 21st franchise we've covered, where at the time of covering, I had already seen all the films in the franchise.
Nice.
Yeah.
I wish I could be like, oh yeah, it's my 25th, but I don't know.
Yeah. It'd be interesting to know who has... It would probably be you would have more, I imagine.
Would it be?
Because, I mean, you watch things like The Mummy.
Yeah, but you've got things like fucking Death Note and shit.
I hadn't seen all of Death Note, though, or Yu-Gi-Oh!
Okay. All right. Hey, Richard, well, we talk about titles a lot on this podcast, and this is a funny one because I kind of wish Zathura didn't have a space adventure subtitle after it so it could be more clean. Or maybe I would just prefer if the original Jumanji was called like Jumanji or a Wild Adventure, maybe. I thought maybe it could work. I go back and forth on the titles for Welcome to the Jungle and The Next Level. Welcome to the Jungle kind of sounds like it'd be the DVD release of a compilation of random episodes from the TV show. You know, you got like The Simpsons in Love, and it's a bunch of episodes. It's like, Welcome to the Jungle. It's like the first 6 episodes of the animated series, which we'll talk about in just a minute. I'm surprised the film wasn't called like Enter Jumanji or something like that, like something that emphasizes you're going into the jungle this time. Maybe would have made sense. The Next Level is almost the opposite problem, where it feels a little too safe and obvious. And there were rumors for ages that it'd be another Guns N' Roses song title or something like that.
Oh yeah, I remember. I know that was necessarily rumored, but it was like similar to like Knives Out. Everyone's like, "What's the title scheme for Knives Out? Is it like a violent 2 words thing, or is it Radiohead songs?" But I remember thinking, and it would work for the ending they set up at the end of the second film, and it's like if it's coming here, I liked the idea of calling the second one Paradise City, and putting it in an urban setting.
Nice, yeah, that is cool. Yeah, I guess if the third one is given in like another video game type title, then it's like, well, what Welcome to the Jungle feels like it doesn't fit. Whereas if it's
Jumanji Tutorial, Jumanji The Next Level, I like my this is encroaching on committed to the franchise, but my pitches for
that's fine. So
Jumanji 3 or Jumanji 5 is Final Boss or The Final Boss or Game Over.
Nice. Well, before we get to that, Richard, we are on Continue the Franchise Now, which is a segment of our show where we pitch sequels to the franchise we've just covered. Although, obviously, there have been a whole bunch of Jumanji supplementary material released over the years, like books, video games, an actual board game based on the fictional board game. And I think we had it growing up as well.
Really? We should play it at some point. I like, is it the same book? Because I feel like a Jumanji board game has appeared in the last, 5 years.
Maybe there's new ones.
Yeah, I don't know if it's if it's a reboot, but I suggested to you earlier today, AJ, that next time we're in the same city, as somewhat of a sequel to our Yu-Gi-Oh video, we could play the Jumanji board game and film it.
Yeah, let's do it. There's also a Jumanji-style Indian board game called Grenda, which is enigmatically described as replicating the real-life effects of Jumanji.
Don't know if I want to play that.
Yeah, it sounds. I was like, oh, is it like a virtual reality experience, like an escape room or something? But it says it's a board game, which presumably that means it comes with like a box of leaves and you blow it. So, how intense.
I think it's probably just overstating itself.
Yeah. Most notably, though, as we've mentioned a couple times, there was Jumanji, the animated series, which was inspired by the first film. It ran from 3 seasons from 1996 to 1999 and reimagined the events of the film, with Judy and Peter getting sucked inside Jumanji, where they team up with a still bearded Alan Parrish, who'd been stuck in there since presumably 1969. The lore for this series is actually surprisingly extensive and seemed to do more expansive stuff with the original idea than the original film itself. And to be honest, actually looks pretty interesting. I remember seeing it on TV. I don't know if I ever really watched it.
Yeah. So it is a bit of a Monster of the Week thing. So it's like they play Jumanji, and so it's like you get a clue and you have to solve your clue to get out of the game. And,
that's right, yeah.
And so each week they go in, team up with Alan to solve the mystery of the week. But Alan got sucked in and didn't get to see his clue, and so he doesn't know how to escape.
Right.
And so that's his whole thing. He's like just going through Jumanji. I've just found out now that because it's one of these shows that I assumed it would have got cancelled or just ended 100 Deeds for Eddie McDowd without him completing the 100 Deeds.
Well, My Name is Earl without him doing the 200.
Yeah, that's not as important as 100 Deeds for Eddie McDowd. But it does end with him realizing how to get out, and it's something that he neglected doing as soon as he got there. And it was like
Right.
one of the first things he encountered. It was actually that was the thing, all he needed to do apparently. But yeah, I remember watching this show quite a bit as a kid, and there's one specific episode I remember where it's like Alan's being poisoned, and you can see the poison, and it's like spreading up his arms, and they have to stop it before it reaches the heart, but they can see Alan's memories, and it's like. It's you see him so like the kids somehow can see him having his turn, and they're about to see his clue, but then they have to stop it because the poison's about to reach his heart, and so they don't get to find out the clue.
Wow.
But that was like, oh my god, this is going to be the last episode. Like
that sounds great.
It was actually a really cool show. But do you know who voiced Peter Shepard in the show?
I'm about to tell you. Do you want to tell me?
You tell me the first name, and I'll tell you the second name.
Ashley
Johnson.
Ashley Johnson voices Peter in the show, the voice of Ellie from The Last of Us. Do you know who voiced Alan in the show?
I don't know how to. I've never known how to say his name, but it's
Bill Fagerbacky.
Yeah.
Who plays Patrick Star. Yeah. So I'm just imagining, like, in the jungle you must wait until the dust refinery. Yeah, so maybe we could check that show out for some film franchise follow-ups as well.
If we're able to find it, I'd be keen.
It's on DVD and stuff.
Oh, yeah.
In terms of the inevitable continuation of the Kasdan series, a third film, while not officially greenlit, is in the works. They've said they're working on it. A lot of progress was halted by the pandemic. There's a lot of speculation. Some of it is even confirmed by Kasdan himself that the third film will feature the second film's villain, Jürgen the Brutal, who is played by Roy McCann, returning but as the person playing him, because it is actually quite heavily implied in the next level that Jürgen the Terrible is not an NPC but another player, because there's one point where his chest gets tapped and his strengths and weaknesses pop out of his, on the screen, which is something that only happens for the playable characters. That's apparently, so I'm imagining like a kid from Stranger Things is playing.
Yeah, or like, because I was trying to think of because Dwayne Johnson posted something on Instagram being like, we loved bringing, because it's the Hound from Game of Thrones, or I think a Yarp from Hot Fuzz.
Yarp.
that plays Jürgen, and he posted this thing about what's his name, Rory McCann, Rory Calhoun, known for standing and walking. He's this thing praising him, and he's like, yeah, for those who caught it, he's an avatar. We're gonna find out who. #Jumanji, #mystery player, and it's like it's made out like we'll know who the character is. So it's like, is it Spencer's mum? Is it the principal from the first film?
Is it Nora?
Yeah. Is it Robin Williams?
It's also probably safe to assume that the third film will revolve around Jumanji breaking loose into the real world, since that's what we saw at the end of the second film.
Yeah, like the end of the second film.
Similar to the original film.
Yeah, just on that as well. That like, and I said this to you last night off pod, but it's like it's like the post credits or the mid credits scene has so many different plot points where it's like you could have stopped here, and each one of them completely changes what the next film is going to be. Because you have Lamar Morris go, oh, is that an old video game? He touches it, it lights up. You cut there, and it's like, oh, here we go again, kind of thing. And then you can kind of ignore that. It's just showing, oh, Jumanji's still active. The video game still
Jumanji
works.
Persists.
Yeah. And then you have one ostrich running down the road, and it's like, just a bit of a laugh. You could not make a third one, and you'd be fine, Then a whole flock of ostriches, a murder of ostriches, like runs down the road, and it's like, okay, here's a tease for the third one. And it's like you kind of need to follow this up, because this is what you're implying is pretty crazy. And then the kids see it happen, and it's like, you have to pick up the next one right here.
Right. Yeah. I'm interested to see. I think it's probably pretty likely we'll see the main characters interact with their avatar counterparts, which is like, I'm worried about that, because that seems to be what's obviously going to happen, because it's not like you keep Alex Wolff but don't keep Dwayne Johnson for your third film.
Also, this is our second franchise. Poorly placed use of statistics. This is our second franchise to like soft reboot. It's reboot to some extent its continuity, starring a Wolf brother after Death Note, which stars Nat Wolff in the Netflix one.
And I'm concerned about this idea because I'm not particularly excited about that because it's taking away the fish out of water stuff. And like, who is Smolder Bravestone?
That's the thing. It's like, are we gonna see? And this is essentially my continued franchise. So, but it's like, it seems like what we would probably see is like the NPC version. Like if you're playing as one player, what Ruby Roundhouse and the others look like when no one's inhabiting them. What Nigel Billingsley knows these characters as, brought it to the real world. And then it's like, I don't know, do you somehow do the flip of it? So you now have Alex Wolff is being inhabited by Smolder Bravestone, and so Smolder Bravestone,
kind of interesting.
Yeah, but then it's like, again, why would you not have The Rock in the film?
Yeah, but you can have it be that for some reason they've got to like switch.
They swap personalities, something like that.
Yeah,
but it does feel like, Jumanji's coming to the real world.
For better or worse. In a Cinema Blend article called "It's Time for the Jumanji Franchise to Connect with Zathura Again," Jumanji Welcome to the Jungle producer Hiram Garcia is quoted as saying there are different versions of the game and in multiple universes. Said the bizarre region in the first film, or the Welcome to the Jungle, was added as part of the film to be the central hub for a larger universe of the game, and this could extend to the reaches of space. Jack Black, who is again weirdly very passionate about Jumanji and Zathura being one franchise, said in like a red carpet interview that he wants the next film in the series to send the characters into space and uncover the mastermind behind their magical board games, which he believes are either aliens or a super genius like Elon Musk. I do like this idea of getting some insight.
It feels like him bullshitting on the red carpet with like the Elon Musk thing.
But that's what it sounds like. He's so excited to talk about it.
Well, like mentioning Elon Musk is one of those things where it's like, I'm taking this too seriously. You're asking comedic actor Jack Black, and I'm now realizing I have a reputation to live up to.
Like the lady asks him about it, and his like eyebrows start dancing, and he's like, "Ooh, I'm so glad you asked." He's like very into talking about this.
Yeah.
But yeah, I do like the idea of getting some insight into the origins of Jumanji, especially considering we see it as early as 1869 in the like prelude to the first film. And also that it's not as simple. Like, I feel like the TV show, the animated series, implies that the board game is just a portal to another dimension. But like the universe of Jumanji is full of like NPCs. Like there is video game language built into how people interact, which says to me that it is a game, like a constructed universe by a game designer.
Yeah, imagine if it's just like an MMORPG and Nigel Billingsley's actually the only NPC in the entire game.
Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised if it went somewhere like that. I mean, we know he's not because we see like the little kid who takes them to the Black Mamba and stuff like that. Yeah. Yeah, so you've said your idea is the thing you said?
More or less, I would like to see it explicitly crossover with Zathura. And I think that, and I hadn't thought about it, but the idea of like, where are these games coming from? But then it's like, how committed are they to wrapping up a trilogy and the entire lore, and rather than just making it go forever?
All of these... all the things we've talked about so far, I think, are great. Continue the franchise ideas, and presented before us now, as I see it, in the fun exercise of pitching new ideas. I think there are three options. There is a pitch for a third Kasdan film, which we've been doing, a direct sequel to Zathura, which we've sort of done as well, or an entirely new game with a theme that isn't jungle or space, and it does the first one again. And on that note, I thought of Mariquado, an underwater game. I feel like that's the most defined theme you could take it to, or like you become a water person so you can breathe underwater.
Luca. It's just Luca.
There you go, it's just Luca. Part of me does still want to see the Kasdan cast played by completely different stereotypes, though it'd be weird to do it now. I think the ship has sailed. And part of me wants to see Zathura Welcome to the Galaxy, which you just repeat the same formula as Welcome to the Jungle. A-list stars. And the fun of it, I guess, would be coming up with who plays those characters, which I haven't
do
done.
that now.
All right, so what is the difference between like I feel like you would have more like sci-fi actors instead of action adventure characters, which is what Welcome to the Jungle is. So like Sigourney Weaver could be
Sam
like
Neill.
the smart scientist. That would be great. I would love to see Sam Neill doing this kind of shit, you know? You want to get someone like
Elizabeth Debicki.
Who's she? She the
real tall girl from Tenet.
Yeah, cool. Yeah, good idea. You could get like Michael Fassbender from like as the android, you know, playing another android like from Prometheus.
Danny McBride.
But
Danny McBride would be so good in one of these movies, man.
Yeah, totally. But like I just feel like regardless of who you cast, and I'm sure people are going to come up with interesting ideas to pitch to us on the Discord this week.
Adam Driver.
Of course, Adam Driver. Like he's
got a place in
any
the franchise.
Yeah. Just the fun of taking this concept of like name an actor with like somewhat of a distinct style or no style, like or at least a typecast, and casting the opposite as their real world counterpart, I think is very fun, and I would love to see that kind of thing done more.
Yeah.
And that's it. That's our Jumanji episode. A surprisingly long episode
I don't think it's surprising at all.
Unsuspecting episode. We're now up to a segment called Ranked at Franchise, where if you go to letterboxd.com/cultpopture, we've got our Letterboxd account, and we've got a list of every franchise we've ever watched, and we've ranked them. So there are currently 132 films on this franchise, on this list. And so we're going to add Jumanji to this list. Now, in terms of like pure enjoyment and like value in terms of how much fun we've had as enjoyers of film, I think should probably rank pretty high. I think that the only thing standing in its way is it kind of feels like a franchise by accident. You know what I mean? So it's like two films that for a very long time weren't considered explicitly connected, and then two that are definitely connected. But yeah, like, does that speak against its credibility as a franchise? What do you think?
No.
At the end of the day, it's 4 films, each of which are either really, really good or really, really great, in my opinion. And so I want to rank it pretty high. I'd say, I'm tempted for top 10, Richard.
Yeah.
Tempted. Very tempted by top 10. We've got, at number 13, we've got Planet of the Apes. Then 12, we've got Terminator. 11, we've got Lord of the Rings, which is The Hobbit is wrapped up in that, which is why probably I imagine people would be shocked to hear it so low. At 10, we've got Spider-Man, and at 9, we've got The Muppet Movie, or the Muppet Movies. Is there anywhere you'd place it amongst them?
That Spider-Man Muppet Movie area, I'd be comfortable putting it there.
Between them?
Yeah.
No, that's number 10. That's the 10th best franchise we've ever watched.
Yeah,
knocking the Spider-Man Raimi trilogy out of the top 10. Sacrilege. But I mean, the next level is like as good of a sequel as Spider-Man 2, in my opinion. So.
Yeah, for sure.
All right, there we go. That is, I reckon that is easily going to be our most controversial list placement in
that's
in
the
ages.
One that's the most like we just fucking love it.
Yeah. But also, like, the next level does get points for being specifically sequely in all the best ways. And I think for a podcast about franchises, that is noteworthy, you know?
Sure.
Cool. All right, well, now, Richard, all we've got left to do is franchise roulette, which we haven't done in, like 6 months, it feels like. So this is where we are going to draw a random number. Is it I feel like it's my turn to look at what the number is.
All right.
This is where we've got a list of franchises, and we're going to draw a random number, and then I am going to make Richard guess what it is. before you tell us the number, I just want to say that if you've enjoyed this podcast, then please consider supporting us in all the places you can. You can like us on Facebook. You can follow us on Twitter. You can follow us on Instagram. You can subscribe to our 2 YouTube channels. The one that you might be listening to the podcast on is called Cult Popture Again, which implies there is just a regular Cult Popture, which you can also subscribe to, and that's just for video essays and that sort of thing. You can also join our Discord, as we've mentioned a couple of times. Come and chat about movies with us. Or if you really want to, you can support us by donating to our Patreon at patreon.com/cultpopture. And stay tuned after this for the post-credit scene, which will come up after the music finishes. Fuck. So how many franchises we've got on the list currently? We've got 126 franchises. So can you give me a random number between 1 and 126?
44.
44? Because you know the number.
And already. You know the franchise.
And that's just as exciting for you, isn't it?
I'll get you to guess the number. All right, the digits are the same.
All right, franchise number 44, Richard, is a trilogy, I think, technically.
Right.
It is directed by someone who we've seen direct in this podcast give it stars people we've seen in this podcast before.
Give me a like. Did all films come out in my lifetime?
Oh, I don't know. I don't think so. You will love this. You'll be so excited.
Okay.
No, the first one came out a year before we were born.
92.
So the second 2 would have.
Did they all come out in the 90s?
Oh, let me check. It's a specific type of franchise.
Yeah.
No, the third one came out in 2003. It's a specific type of franchise where it's like it's not really continuous. It's similar in ilk, I would say, to how Evil Dead 2 is just a remake of Evil Dead 1.
Okay. It's comedy?
No.
Horror?
I don't think so. No, it's definitely not a horror.
Well, it's not something you know an awful lot about.
I'm aware of the names of the films. I've never seen them.
Interesting. Would you assume I haven't seen them?
I know. I don't know if you've seen them. I know you really want to see them if you haven't. I've heard you talk about them before. It's okay. Okay, I'll start getting more obvious with hits, right? So we've covered.
Not too obvious.
We've covered another franchise where each entry was solely directed by this person before. Okay,
so every entry was directed by the same person.
That franchise had 4 films in it.
Was it Richard Donner?
No. Though the episode we did, we had some guests on, and it was a very good episode, and we all really enjoyed it.
Oh, is it? I've worked it. It's El Mariachi.
It's El Mariachi.
Hey.
Have you seen these?
I've seen El Mariachi.
Right, so we are watching the Robert Rodriguez, friend of Jon Favreau, actually.
Yeah.
Robert Rodriguez trilogy, El Mariachi, Desperado, and Once Upon a Time in Mexico. Does that franchise have a name?
I think it's just El Mariachi trilogy. Oh, maybe is it referred to as the like the name of the
Was my Evil Dead comparison accurate? That it's
it is. It's like he's
like Desperado is essentially just a remake
Mexico trilogy.
The Mexico trilogy. Desperado is essentially just a high budget remake of El Mariachi. And El Mariachi was like this famous pulled up by its bootstraps kind of like guerrilla filmmaking.
Funny thing about El Mariachi, I've actually only because I found the DVD of it's actually quite a hard movie to find, but it because it's in Spanish, it's I watched it with the director's commentary because it's a very low amount of not very dialogue heavy, and the dialogue that there is in Spanish. So I just watched it with it defaults to the director's commentary on the DVD. Because it's like, this is the only reason you'd be watching this film, is if you're interested in like how they made it. So yeah, I'm keen to watch the other two.
Nice. Cool. So tune in next week. I don't know what we're doing next week here. We actually haven't come up with a plan for the next off week, so that's exciting.
I guess we'll just have to improvise something.
No. But tune in 2 weeks for El Mariachi. Let us know in the comments or on the Discord what you thought of the Jumanji series, but if you say anything negative about the second 2 films, I will not reply. And yeah, we'll see you next time, everybody. Thank you for joining us. Bye. Alrighty, everybody, and welcome to the post-credits scene. This is a segment at the end of each episode where if you donate $5 or more over at patreon.com/coldpopture, you get to give us something to talk about in this, the post-credits scene. Richard, lay it on me. Who's it from and what is it?
This comes to us from Brent Taylor from Texas, who says, if you could enact one law that goes into effect across the entire world, what would it be? Don't murder people.
Utter dictatorship. Everyone has to agree with me and be nice to me.
Prima nocta.
What's that?
That's the thing where the king is allowed to sleep with your wife before you are.
Why would you want that to happen?
No, I was suggesting it as one for you. When you were like supreme king.
Oh, right. I didn't say that. I just want people to be nice to me.
It's a joke. Tony Stark says it in in Age of Ultron when he's trying to lift up Thor's hammer and he says, she'll rule Asgard, or that's something the description. He said, well, my first thing is I'll be instating Prima Nocta, which is it's a kind of a problematic line and something you would expect from Joss Whedon now.
Yeah, I was going to say that's that classic Joss Whedon banter.
Don't even respect him enough to say his
Joss
name, right?
Whedon banter. That's the bite. That's the Whedon bite that everyone wants their quippy dialogue. When people talk about how Joss Whedon writes quippy dialogue, that's actually what they're referring to.
That one line, yeah. I don't know. I feel like you wanted a fun answer to this, Brent, but it would probably just be like, I don't know, remember we did a Cold Pop Shit etiquette guide at the start of last year, and everything just boiled down to don't be a dick. That would be it, and it would be decided by me.
Whatever. My answer is whatever is the because this is essentially a Thanos snap, right?
Is it?
It's like I snap my fingers and everyone has to comply to something. It's whatever the most word efficient way of saying, of essentially echoing what I believe the world should look like.
Capitalist.
Politically and that sort of thing. That's the rule that I would change. Actually, you know what? I've got it. My rule would be that if you have over $500 million, you have to pay it to the state.
To Cold Pop Shit Patreon.
Yeah. There should be a maximum wage. Whatever that is. $500 million was pulled out of the top of my head. I don't know what would be agreed to be the best amount of money.
Well, yeah, it should be that you can't legally have. But then it's one of those things again that fuck it, there are no laws if you're rich.
I'm making a law. a maximum wage. That's my law. That's what I believe.
Yeah, no, you'll get so many I'm technically not earning, I feel like...
No, you won't. Not with my rule that I've made.
Yeah, well, but no, people...
It's a magic rule.
You're not allowed to murder people, but you still did that one time.
Fuck off. I'm stop recording now. And tell people I murdered people.